We are monitoring breaking news from Southeast Asia tonight, where Malaysia Airlines is reporting they have lost contact with flight MH370.
Well, what are they hiding about a missing airline that disappeared 10 years ago? There really is a cover-up related to this plane. The United States must know exactly what happened to this plane. If this plane did crash into the ocean, it would have been leaked to the internet. Here's satellite imagery. United States saw it. Here's exactly where it crashed. Blah, blah, blah. The person who leaked these videos had an emotional reaction.
Just witnessed 270 people disappear, and I have to tell people about this.
So why are we seeing a flash here? Because we're breaking through the fabric of reality. Like, is that aliens? Oh no, this is us. We've got these black projects and we've figured out this technology that's well above the public's understanding. And you go, well, how are they hiding all this? And the answer is they're not. It's all in the open. All the scientific papers are published. I look at that technology in those videos, and to me, it's very easy to see how that could become a doomsday weapon. But I think that even as amazing as it is to say that we teleported a Boeing 777 in 2014, that's just the beginning.
Well, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Nice to be here, man.
Yeah, man. Good to have you here. You tie in perfectly to a couple of other guests that I've had on. So Bob Greenier, we talked about the technology that we're going to be examining today. Randall Carlson, so with the plasma stuff. So my mind's kind of blown, man, from talking to you for the last 24 hours and last night. Like, it's very compelling. Like, there's definitely something here. It's a very compelling story. There's very compelling evidence, and it makes a lot of sense scientifically. And I didn't really know what to expect, but having researched this and talking to you last night, my mind's blown, and I think the listeners' minds are going to be blown as we talk through this.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm a guy that I like to think that I'm a skeptical guy. I'm a rational, scientific type of approach to anything that is out there. And for me, when talking about the MH370 case, the plane that disappeared in 2014, I thought there must be a rational explanation for everything that had kind of gone on with this plane. And the more I started digging into it, the more I found out that there really is a cover-up related to this plane. The United States must know exactly what happened to this plane, which then leads us to the question, what are they hiding? Well, what are they hiding about a missing airline that disappeared 10 years ago? Why have we never found it? And when you look at the MH370 videos, which we'll look at here today, you go, wow, that's what they're hiding. It seems impossible, but it makes sense. The total story makes sense. And now, I'm not out here to pretend like I know every answer, but I think that the investigation has put together such a strong, compelling, comprehensive story and case that it's not easily dismissed. And it really demands an answer from the United States government specifically on what are we hiding about this plane? If it's not the MH370 videos, what is it? Where is this thing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think today maybe we talk about the plane, we talk about the incident, the event, all the details of the event, and then we kind of shift towards the technology and some of the other interesting components of it on the second half. But I've got my party outfit on today, a little bit bright, but that's all right. This is what happens when I let my wife pick out my outfit. But it is a celebration outfit. I think while we record, we're probably going to hit 25,000 subscribers. So,
heck yeah, congratulations. So make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button, everybody who's out there.
That's
Make sure you guys are following the Matt podcast that we've got going on here. Check out this amazing studio that I'm in right now. I mean, this thing's awesome.
Studio, right?
Yeah, it's the best one I've ever been in, honestly. So there you go.
Nice. Love it. Appreciate that. Well, good, man. Well, let's describe the incident if you could, and maybe start at the beginning. Like, what happened?
Yeah. Well, when we're talking about Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, this is the plane that disappeared March 8th, 2014. So this is 10 years ago. Boeing 777, this plane is one of the largest planes in the fleet, size of a city block. 239 people on board, which includes 12 crew members. This plane is flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. It's a night flight. And 40 minutes after they take off, they're flying to the northeast. Plane goes dark. This is pretty much all we knew for several weeks afterwards. There were times that were being thrown out that didn't really match up with the time the plane disappeared. Like, they say this plane went dark 17:21 UTC. But the next day, we were being told in the news that Subang Air Traffic Control lost contact with the plane at 1840 UTC. Well, that's an hour and 20 minutes difference. How does that make any sense? I think one of the most important things for the listeners, if you're not familiar with the plane, or if you are and you're just going down memory lane, is to remember how much obfuscation there was early on. I mean, people were wondering, like, how do we not know where this plane went? Did it crash somewhere? We thought maybe it crashed in the South China Sea where the plane went dark. And it wasn't for days later that the Malaysian government came out and said, no, we were actually tracking it on military radar even after the plane went dark. We watched it fly back over the peninsula of Malaysia. And you're going, wait, what? You're like, I thought we disappeared in the South China Sea. Now you're saying that you knew the whole time for days that it flew back over the peninsula of Malaysia? This is important because we were searching in the South China Sea for several days. But this also means that the Malaysian military knew the whole time we were never going to find anything in the South China Sea. So right away, we should be suspicious. Like, this has already got the hallmarks of obfuscation and a potential cover-up at play. And so this plane turns back around. And if you look at the flight path, you realize that this was a manual turn back. So somebody was in control of this plane. It was being manually controlled. They turned off the autopilot. They descended right after this plane turned around as well, which is a big clue. And they started flying towards Penang Airport, which is the closest airport to land a Boeing 777. And right away, I would say, well, that seems like an emergency event.
Something's going wrong.
Something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people kind of figured this out, but everybody's waiting for the media to tell them what to think. And then we find out that for whatever reason, it doesn't land in Penang. It flies over Penang. But we know it was flying very low because the co-pilot's cell phone pings a cell tower in the area, which means it had to be below about 7,000 feet. That's very low. That's like landing. And then we see that the plane, as we can see on this map here, makes a sharp, not sharp turn, but a turn deviation to the northwest. So if it was going to fly straight, it would have flown right over Indonesia. Instead, it turns to the northwest and starts flying towards the Andaman Sea and the Nicobar Islands. This is where it's very odd that all of a sudden the military claims they lost contact with the plane at 1822 UTC, where we see this star on this graphic on this image right up here. If you actually plot the radar plots that were shown to the public and extrapolate this out, this line goes out and basically runs into the Nicobar Islands, which is on the west side of this map right here. And that's very important because in one of the two videos, we have satellite coordinates. And the satellite coordinates in the satellite MH370 video are of the Nicobar Islands within 100 miles if you would just extrapolate that route that we're looking at on the screen right there. Which says, okay, wow, if somebody was faking these videos, they knew exactly where to put the plane. Because this is like 300, 400 miles from the supposed last location that the military was tracking the plane. The other thing that I will add is what the graph that we were just looking at there with the star and the last radar plot. There's no chance this is the last radar plot. In the 2019 Royal Aeronautical Society video that people can Google if they want, I found a clip in there which shows all the radars that were still in range at that location. At least 5 different radars were still in range from 3 different countries. So there's no excuse about it was just lost. India was in range, Thailand was in range, and so was Indonesia. The excuses have been Indonesia's radars were just turned off that night. Just incompetence turned them off. Sure. India and Thailand, no word, no excuse, no explanation whatsoever. The only thing I've read is that, well, Malaysia never reached out to them, like, which is obviously nonsense. Like, you know, so we know it was still being tracked right there. So right now we're already pretty skeptical because now 5 days later, we've moved the search to the Andaman Sea because now we know the plane actually didn't crash in the South China Sea. And all of a sudden, United States intelligence sources start leaking to the press, including CNN, that the plane flew into the South Indian Ocean. They leak to the U.S. media, unnamed U.S. intelligence sources, on March 13th, 2014, 5 days after the plane disappears, that the rumor is this plane went into the South Indian Ocean. And everybody's going, what? So you've got this plane going to South China Sea, turning back around, flying over Malaysia, then flying to the Nicobar Islands, and then it makes a 270-degree sharp turn and just south into the South Indian Ocean.
Wow.
And so we all start searching the South Indian Ocean. And what do we find there? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. 10 years later, we've never found anything in the South Indian Ocean. We didn't find one piece of the plane. We didn't find a black box. We found absolutely nothing down there. And just as a last quick point, people say, okay, well, what do you think happened, Ashton? Well, I think the videos happened, which we'll look at in a minute, but I also think that there was a fire event. Is that if you look at all the witnesses that saw this plane, none of them saw it in the South Indian Ocean. We have a witness, Catherine T., who was at that location in the Nicobar Islands, where those coordinates are, within 100 miles of it. She has a very detailed sighting of being on a boat. She was the night watch on the boat, and she sees a low-flying plane, glowing orange with smoke coming out of the back of it, descending throughout the course of her sighting. And that's what we see in the videos. And we've got a real witness who corroborates this event with the smoke coming out of the back of it. Mike McKay, who was the first witness, saw the plane on fire for 5 to 10 seconds at the location where the plane went dark initially. You got people on the coast that hear loud noises at that exact same time, indicating some type of emergency type of event. And then 10 minutes after the plane goes dark and turns back around and descends down, there's 8 fishermen on a boat just 10 miles off the coast of Thailand and Malaysia, and they see the plane flying unusually low. You add all this up, and it tells you there was a fire event. They were flying low because they were trying to get oxygen into the cabin so that the passengers were able to breathe so that they wouldn't be overcome by the smoke. They were trying to go to Penang because they were trying to land the plane, closest airport to land the plane. They potentially deviate to the Nicobar Islands because there was still communication with the plane. And that has just been classified. They've never released it to us. How do I know that? Because there was a China Times, only reported in the China Times, the very next day, claiming that they intercepted a communication from MH370 with the United States Navy and said that the pilot was saying that the plane was disintegrating and attempting an emergency landing. You guys can find this if you don't believe me. I couldn't believe we found this. Because when you add up these sources, we've got an eyewitness who sees the plane on fire with smoke coming out of the back of it. We've got a China Times reported Mayday call, I will call it, saying that the plane is disintegrating, attempting an emergency landing. In both of those sightings, they see the plane flying low and descending. And then we look at the MH370 videos, and we see a plane flying low, turning, descending, with smoke coming out of the back of it in both videos. That's 3 sources of corroboration, independent sources of corroboration right there. So for me, to kind of wrap this up, I would say that something very anomalous occurred here. Like, this to me reeks of state-sponsored espionage that occurred. That's the only way you could cover up something of this magnitude that we would still not know 10 years later, that there was some kind of fire on board this plane, accidental, intentional, and then this plane got deviated away from its intended flight path, far away from that location, out to the Nicobar Islands, where something anomalous happened in the Nicobar Islands, and then we came up with this fake story. We, meaning the United States Intelligence Services, came up with this fake story of sending the plane to the South Indian Ocean on a wild goose chase, right? Like, if you're the criminal and you're trying to get away, and somebody says, which way did they go?
That way.
That way. It went that way, right?
Right.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
And it's only now, 10 years later, that we can really unravel this mystery, because we say, yeah, we know we've been searching for 10 years and never found anything. If it was 2014 or even 2015, a lot of people ask me, Ashton, what are you going to say when they find the plane in the ocean? It's 10 years later. They did 2 searches already, and they're planning a 3rd one, and they never found a single thing. So we're a little beyond that at this point. So
the Nicobar Islands, what's special? What's there? What exists? There's a military base?
There's a couple bases there. There's Port Blair and there's Car Nicobar, which are controlled by the Indian government, but to some degree the United States has a presence as well. Okay. So that's where they would potentially have had radar that would have been still tracking the plane as well. And in the Nicobar Islands, this is, like I said before, in the satellite video, we can see coordinates in there. There was a lot of controversy over these coordinates, where initially we thought there must be a hidden minus sign in front of one of the coordinates that, like, it's kind of cropped. So we thought maybe the minus sign is just underneath the cropped view. Why? Because if you had a minus sign in front of the north-south coordinate, all of a sudden this location is the South Indian Ocean. And we're going, whoa, this is where they told us the plane went, so must make sense. And I'm sitting there racking my brain for weeks about, well, yes, maybe there's a minus sign, but if so, now the plane's flying north and not south. But if you're flying to the South Indian Ocean, you would expect the plane to be flying south. And that's when we figured out that, well, there's a way to prove it. We're able to prove if there's a minus sign or not. You can prove it because you can look at you can graph out the coordinates in the plane. And you find out either it's going north into the east, the plane in the video, or it's going south into the east. So we go, oh, either way, it must be going to the east. And you say, okay, well, if you're going north into the east, you're turning to the right. If you're going south into the east, you're turning to the left. What do we have in two videos? We have a plane turning to the left in both videos from two different perspectives. That means there's no minus sign. That has to be the Nicobar Islands. And this is when I started getting excited, because if you're an investigator, investigating crime, you've got a major clue here. We've got a location of our crime that's happening. And that's when I found Catherine T. I went, okay, we've got a location. I want to cross-reference all the witnesses. All these witnesses have been ignored. Let's cross-reference them. And you find Catherine T's sighting within 100 miles of those coordinates. Keep in mind, those coordinates are not necessarily of the plane itself. These are coordinates of this video that we're looking at, where there's some crosshair that we don't see that's on the ground somewhere, right? And that's where the coordinates of the location are. So it being 100 miles from her sighting might as well be right on top of her. And that's when I went, wow. I reached out to her. I got in touch with Catherine T last year. I was very scared for her because I figured she might be one of the only human beings on the planet that saw this plane firsthand before it disappeared. And I spoke about her sighting, and man, that was an illuminating conversation. You know what she told me? I asked her, what time do you think you saw the plane? I didn't want to hear any of what other people were trying to say, because everybody was trying to twist her story to their own means. And she told me 1840 UTC. And I went, wow, that's the exact same time, the day the plane disappeared, that we claimed Subang Air Traffic Control lost contact with the plane. If you extrapolate the travel of the plane, you find out around 1840, it's going to be in the Nicobar Islands, right there. And then you look at that China Times reported Mayday call. They claim that communication was intercepted at 2:43 a.m. You convert that from Malaysian time to UTC, 1843 UTC. I'm just looking at this going, we have a window of 5 minutes now or less in which we're watching this plane disappear on a video. So I've got a location, I've got a time of this plane within 5 minutes, and I've got 3 corroborating sources, independent corroborating sources. This is where I tell people, like, you know, if there was a court case, I feel very confident, even if I'm telling people that we teleported a plane away, that I've got enough evidence that, you know, we can convict pretty much anybody, the U.S. government, of the crime in this case. So to me, you know, the witness was the biggest thing. The other thing that she told me was, right after I asked about the time, she said that she felt like the other investigators pressured her into changing her time. Now I'm talking about the independent group. I'm talking about Jeff Wise. If you've seen him on the Netflix documentary, he got kicked out of the independent group because they didn't like his conspiracy theories or what have you. But all these independent group people, all these independent investigators, they were all convinced that these satellite pings that put the plane in the South Indian Ocean that came from U.S. intelligence are indisputable, despite finding nothing. Therefore, they thought there's no way Catherine T could have seen the plane. Because if her sighting is legitimate, there's no chance this plane went to the South Indian Ocean. The plane's got smoke coming out of the back of it and descending and landing in the Nicobar Islands. It didn't fly for another 6 hours after that, right. You know? So this is the part where, you know, if you're watching right now, your eyes are probably opening, going like, okay, wait, what? How did I not know about any of this?
Right.
And like we talked about last night, well, it's because the Netflix documentary doesn't talk about like 80% of the evidence or more. Almost none of these documentaries I've seen talk about it. Heck, I was watching this one guy, Mentor Pilot. This is a real pilot. And he's sitting there, and first of all, he gets a very important fact wrong. There are lithium-ion batteries on this plane, which you're like, okay, well, there's a fire. What's the cause? Well, there's 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo bay of this plane.
And how do we know that?
Because we find out that on March 20th, 2 weeks after this plane disappears, the Malaysian Airlines CEO finally admits, yes, there really was dangerous cargo on this plane. There was 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries. The Straits Times, Singapore's newspaper, reports that these batteries had missed 2 security screenings as well. So now we've got our, we've got our suspect here, which is this lithium-ion batteries. We got this fire event going on, and Mentor Pilot's video says, oh, well, there was 5,000 pounds of lithium-ion batteries on this plane. He got confused because the cargo was 5,000 pounds total, mostly electronics of this mysterious cargo that was out there, but only 500 pounds of it was lithium-ion batteries. The part that blows me away about this is how can you be a pilot in 2024, make a video about a missing plane, and pretend like 5,000 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo is safe? He literally says this in his video, which to me makes Mentor Pilot completely incompetent. Completely incompetent. If you are a pilot that thinks that 5,000 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in your cargo is safe, I urge you to go look up the history of lithium-ion batteries on airplanes, how they were banned in 2016. We looked that up last night.
Right. Like February 2016, early on, not too long after this incident, which is pretty interesting.
And there were several other incidents that happened too. So, why am I confident? Another name that I will drop is Billy Vincent. He was former security director for the FAA. I reached out to him just a couple months ago because I was looking at old articles and found that there were several people that speculated on the fire event, even before they knew the batteries were even on the plane, because there were so many other planes that had similar incidents like this happen to them. And he told me about UPS Flight 6, which is an almost identical incident, other than it being a cargo plane and not a passenger plane. And he told me that in that situation, the smoke from the lithium-ion battery fire from the cargo bay overwhelmed the pilot before he could even get his hood on. That's how fast it knocks people out. And then in that situation, the smoke blocked the windshield. So the co-pilot who took over couldn't even see outside. So they tried to land, but they couldn't because they couldn't see, and ended up crashing the plane, and they both ended up dying. And you look at that and you go, wow, this is so similar to what happened at Penang. Why didn't they land at Penang? Well, it's middle of the night, 2 a.m., completely pitch black, but you also potentially have smoke blocking your cockpit windshield. So that's the theory, the initial theory that I've thrown out there, is that this must be a fire. It's corroborated by witnesses, videos, corroborated by China Times only reported media that was never reported in Western media. Really, and Catherine T being the star witness who really said, like, not only was the time of my sighting the exact time you would expect, but also that the other experts were trying to get her to change the time because it didn't fit with their theories. So
these two videos. We've got apparently video evidence, and there's some debate about whether or not they're authentic. People have attempted to debunk them, and you're convinced that they're completely authentic, and you've got a lot of good reasoning to back that up. So talk to me about when these two videos were released and what they're shown, and then maybe Ryan can pull them up and we can walk through them.
Okay. Yeah. So both of these videos come from a very, very obscure YouTube account called Regicide Anon. Only had, I think, a couple hundred followers, if that. And this account was like a UFO account. Like, they would show these UFO videos, most of which I would argue were fake. Now, these videos, this is a completely another level. The amount of detail and evidence in these videos goes so far beyond any fake video that's ever been put out there on the internet. And the interesting thing about it is that we know for a fact that at the latest, the satellite video was published May 19th, 2014, which is about 70 days after the plane disappeared. So we've now got a window. That's the latest. In the satellite video of Regicide Anon's video of this plane, it says received March 12th, 2014. That's 4 days after the plane disappeared. On March 12th, we were still searching in the Andaman Sea there. Nobody even proposed the idea of the South Indian Ocean yet. It also says source protected. Now that's interesting because other videos don't say source protected. They say like source, email submission, things like that. So it tells you this person was like an aggregate that was pulling in videos and putting them on the internet. There's a little bit of disinformation about this, where people claim, well, was Regicide Anon the hoaxer of these videos? No, they were not. And there are later videos these videos were uploaded by later people as well. And in one of those, the Vimeo upload version of it, they assert that the video must be CGI or something, but they don't offer any evidence for it. But they also say that Regicide Anon, the first uploader of the video, argued with them adamantly about the authenticity of the videos. That's very unusual. So the person who first uploaded them was arguing with other uploaders saying these videos are legit. I've speculated that the reason why there's this 4 days to 70-day window is that perhaps Regicide Anon had to be convinced that what they were looking at was legit too. When we look at these videos, we have no basis for what this stuff should look like. What would a satellite video look like? Heck, what does a Predator drone video look like? We have some basis now in 2024. We've seen the Navy DoD FLIR videos, those UFO videos from 2017. There was a Predator drone incident with Russia like a year ago or so as well. So we've seen some, but in 2014 we had none of that. We had none of that. So what's the reference for somebody to even make these videos? There really isn't one out there. So you can imagine the guy that's uploading them, or girl, whoever, even they are probably confused. Heck, the person that recorded these videos might not even have known what they were really looking at here. That's how little basis we have to understand what we're looking at in these videos. When we look at the satellite video here in a minute, a lot of people initially can't even tell if we're looking up or down. That's how little basis we have. So spoiler alert, you're looking down in this satellite video. And so below that, you're looking at the ocean, and you're looking at the clouds and the plane above that. But this is the reason why it's like, this case is such a unique situation where we've got this mysterious plane that's been missing for 10 years. We get these two videos that are clearly, even if they are hoax videos, which I do not think that they are, then somebody was trying to get it to look like real military classified assets, right? One of them is supposed to be a satellite video, we don't understand. The other one's supposed to be a Predator drone video. And so just to kind of round out this, I would say that when you look at the psychological profile, really analyzing the videos, if you watch them as many times as I have, which is probably hundreds of times at this point, you start to develop a psychological profile for, like, if this is real, I have a good idea of the mindset of the person who was leaking this video. Like, they freaked out. They saw this. They went, I just watched a plane blip out of the sky that we're never going to find. I know that everybody's being fed some BS in the media. And we would know that they're also a U.S. military personnel. This is a big clue. How do we know that? Well, they have access to a satellite video and they have access to a drone video. And not just access, but they have editing access, because it looks like both videos are cropped. Even the drone video, like, normally it'd be like this widescreen video, but we're missing the HUD data and stuff like that. So and the satellite video is some kind of, like, you log into a remote database and they're doing a screen recording. Like, log into the remote satellite database, press the screen record button, now I'm screen recording it. You look at that and go, this had to have been a U.S. military personnel. They probably were there that night when the plane disappeared.
Where?
Like, in the Nicobar Islands on a spy plane, or, because these things can be remote. Like, the drones there's nobody in the drone, right? Somebody's in, like, Texas or something controlling the camera, or on a spy plane controlling the camera. Reason why I say that we'll get to in a minute. But this is where potentially the person who leaked these videos had an emotional reaction. They saw it firsthand, right?
Right.
And then they recorded.
I've just witnessed 270 people disappear, and I have to tell people about this, right?
Yeah, and people have to know, because we're never going to solve the case otherwise.
Right.
And this makes sense in the context of 10 years later, where we're looking, we're like, we never found anything. The official search never found a single thing. So I think it was very highly likely there was a U.S. military personnel, and they probably came down on them really, really hard, because if you're leaking this, and this is really our technology that we're looking at in these videos and not aliens or whatever else, then you just gave away possibly our most secret super weapons ever out there. Like, nuclear weapons are powerful. The ability to teleport a Boeing 777 from one location to the next, or annihilate it if that's what's going on, that is just next level. We're talking 6th generational warfare now. This is control over space and time itself. Not as simple as air supremacy.
Do you have a name of a person who you think may have been the person to leak this, or no?
Yeah, I do. And that was the part where, like, really, you have an emotional reaction when you are doing research and looking around and you're going, whoever did this would have been caught. It took me weeks, 2 weeks, of digging around, trying to find like who are the prominent people that we came down on for espionage or willful retention of classified information or dissemination of classified information. There's lists you can actually find, and I found some of them on Wikipedia and other places, and just start systematically going down the list of names. And that's literally what I did. And a lot of them were big names that people know, like the Chelsea Mannings and the Edward Snowdens and stuff like that. None of them were even close to like what I was looking for in this case. And then I find Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. My God. The moment I found him, I just went, holy crap, this is the guy. He checked every box, every single box. You're like, this guy would need to have access to both videos. Well, turns out he had just been assigned the VPU-2 Wizards, this super secret spy plane program. He had classified clearance above top secret access to Black Project portfolio of the Navy. He was a congressional liaison. He was a naturalized American citizen from Taiwan. He may have been a spy for us against China. He had a pre-existing relationship with the FBI and NCIS. We came down on him super hard. First case of charging an active duty Navy member with espionage since the end of the Cold War.
Wow.
So 50 years, basically. Wow. And you're wondering, and this article right here, this strange case of Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. I found this article and I went, what? Like, it turns out this guy's whole case is marred in secrecy. They won't say anything about what it was that he leaked.
Really?
Why they're coming down on him this hard. They start obfuscating his case too and throw a prostitution charge on there. They ran a sting operation on him. In retrospect, it's obvious why. Because they had no real evidence that he was a spy. And they had to try to build a case. And they couldn't show the world what he leaked. If you show people the MH370 videos and admit this is what he leaked, like, people are going to have a lot of questions. Right? And they also had to be careful about when they started to charge him, because if you charge him too quickly, they're going to tie him to the missing plane.
When was he charged?
So this is the big thing. So he gets assigned to this VPU-2 squadron in February 2014, right before the plane disappears. I had a source tell me that they believe strongly that the VPU-2 also may have a deployment at Diego Garcia military base in the Indian Ocean, which would put him in the right location, potentially, for this all to go down, for him to have been there that night. His lawyer, there's a quote. There's a lot of controversy over when the case was started. I think the U.S. and military were trying to make it look like they were investigating him before this so that people wouldn't piece it together. But there's a direct quote from his lawyer. It says the investigation into him began April 2nd, 2014. That's 1 month out, 3 weeks after the plane disappeared.
What was the date of the plane disappearance?
March 8th, 2014.
Okay.
So you've got March 8th, 2014, plane disappears. He's assigned the VPU-2 Wizards, February 2014, some date. And then April 2nd, they're investigating him. This is huge because you look at the satellite video and you can tell this is a remote terminal Citrix session. Like, they're logged into another database. There's going to be logs for that. U.S. government's got logs for that. They're going to find this person. The moment they see this video on the internet, they're going to find the person that leaked this. They're going to find Edward C. Lynn. And the United States government ended up having to admit that they had no evidence that he was a spy at all. You're like, wait, you're charging him with espionage, but you have no evidence? They had to admit that.
Wow.
That's crazy.
When was this?
So this was all 2014 through 2016. So they put him in pretrial detainment and they would not let him out. To me, that says you're scared of him talking to the media. They were terrified of the case going to trial because the only evidence they had against him was the videos that he leaked. And you would have to show the evidence publicly if that's the case. So instead, what did they do? They sent something called the Goon Squad on him while he was in pretrial detainment. Basically abused him legally as much as you could. You know, put somebody out in the cold, ruffle their cell, whatever you got to do. You know, maybe hit him with some oranges so there's no bruises, stuff like that, right? And he reported this too, by the way. All of this is public information, that he had been abused by this Goon Squad in pretrial detainment. And they basically forced him into a plea deal. Now, why did they have to force him into a plea deal? Because they couldn't show the evidence. So I think Edward C. Lynn is a patriot by all accounts. And when they come and tell him, hey, you just leaked our most secret super weapons, right? Like, we gave you access to nuclear weapons and you betrayed us by leaking this footage on the internet. Maybe even not directly. Maybe he just showed somebody else and they leaked it. Hard to say. But ultimately, Edward C. Lynn is the source, in my opinion. And I think he said, okay, I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that. I'm a patriot. I love this country. Thank you for naturalizing me, etc. And then they said, okay, well, you got to say you're sorry and say you messed up and take this plea deal. Because by taking the plea deal, we don't have to deal with this anymore. We don't ever have to show anybody any of this. And bonus for the military, now Edward C. Lin can never talk about the videos ever again, not even after the plea deal, because that plea deal is going to exist even after his sentence. It's like a condition of the plea deal, is that, yes, we'll drop these espionage charges, but even after you get out of prison, you're not going to be able to talk about this with anyone.
So he can't talk about it today?
Probably not. I've tried to reach out to him several times. And honestly, I plan to find him. I do plan to find him because I think that he's one of the only ways we can prove these videos are real.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if I do find him and he's like, yep, I leaked the videos, half the world's going to say he's lying, he's making it up for clout, but fine. I mean, some people are never going to believe no matter what, right? If he comes out and says that there's no, it's all over. Like if he says he leaked these videos, like I didn't magically find this guy, I had no idea who he was before. I've tried to reach out to him, never been able to directly talk to him. I spoke to his lawyers. I made a renewed push a few weeks ago. Talked to his lawyer's office again, said, look, I need to talk to this guy. He's the guy that leaked these videos. I'm saying his name on all these podcasts. He's never reached back out to me. I finally got in touch with their lawyers, and they said, we can't talk about his case at all unless he gives a release, full release. Like, we can say nothing about it. And I'm sitting there telling him, like, this guy leaked these crazy videos that are on the internet, and he's going viral, and he doesn't even know it, you know? Continue to say that. I found a few phone numbers related to him, tried to call them, can't get anybody to pick up. Left a message on one. Maybe it's his phone number, maybe not. A year ago, I called a number that I was pretty sure was him. Somebody picked up and hung up right away without letting it go to voicemail or anything. So, like, there's something going on here. Because you imagine, like, if it's you and you went to prison, right? And by the way, he got a 9-year sentence after a plea deal, after dropping the espionage charges. That's a long, long time. Even in his appeals, he argued that the sentence was way overly harsh relative to similar cases of dissemination of classified information, which is all the charges that were left. They shaved 3 years off of his case for, the plea deal and good behavior and stuff like that. That's still 6 years in prison. So this guy spent 6 years in prison.
Where does he live now?
I don't know exactly where he lives, and I'm not sure I would say on a podcast necessarily if I did know. But he did get out. He would be out by now. Have tried to track him down. It's going to be really hard, especially if he's in the wind now. Like, I don't know how to really pull him out. But if he's out there, I need to talk to Edward C. Lin. We need to get to the bottom of this thing about these videos, if he leaked these. But just to add a little bit more weight, other cases where people were actually like convicted of espionage, the U.S. government will say what it was they leaked. They say, oh, they exchanged weapons secrets with China, or they gave satellite imagery to somebody. Heck, there was a case of a contractor in Africa who was facing capital punishment, death penalty, over having stolen satellite imagery. And you're going, wow. So, like, even in cases where death penalty is on the table, they're going to tell you what it was that they leaked. Maybe not show you exactly, but they tell you. Edward C. Lin's case, nada. Nothing that's consistent with coming down on somebody for 9 years after a plea deal. They even had to have the military testify as to why what he leaked was so damaging. Why would they need to do that? Shouldn't it just be obvious, right? Like, if you're a judge, like, you leaked some satellite data. That should be obvious, right? Why is the military having to testify to the judge and to the lawyers and stuff about why this was so dangerous? Well, when you look at the MH370 videos and you see some orbs of energy spinning around the plane and zapping it out of the sky, that requires some explanation. Like, is that aliens? Oh, no, this is us. We've got these black projects, and we've figured out this technology that's well above the public's understanding. That to me explains why they would have to do it. So,
yeah. What's the best way to look at the videos? Let's get Ryan to pull up the videos.
Yeah, so we've got the satellite video right here. This is satellite video, airliner, and UFOs. This is the first video that was published May 19th, 2014. And right away, I mean, look at the detail of these clouds. These are not CGI clouds. The people who have been trying to debunk this claim that these are pictures of clouds, but we can actually categorically rule that out, factually speaking, because the clouds actually move and evolve. Now, they don't visibly move, obviously, over a 5-second window, which is which each perspective we're going to see here shifts is only a few seconds. But if you actually do forensic analysis and look at like the first frame and last frame, you can see the clouds jiggling and moving and evolving. Like normally if the clouds were just moving, you'd see like the whole thing like shift, but no, you see like the top like shift, which is consistent with wind shear as well. And also, again, we have two videos and two different perspectives from two completely different angles.
Right.
So these are big clues.
Where all the clouds match up perfectly.
Yeah, the clouds match up. And the best one is
and
like,
the plane. And,
if you like mirror the drone video, because one's from one angle, one's from the other. So if you mirror the drone video, it's still not a perfect comparison, but you can actually see the clouds line up where you could triangulate the position of the drone cropped out of the satellite video with pretty good accuracy. And look at that stuff. It's like, to me, I don't know how people rationalize that as being fake. It's too much detail.
So why do you think Lynn cropped the drone out of the video?
I think for the same reasons he may have cropped other assets out of the video. He was trying to minimize damage to U.S. intelligence. Like these videos, when you look at them, the person who made these was trying to give you just enough hints to solve the case without extra stuff that would damage U.S. sources and methods. At the same time, though, it's a blurry line. Like what we got here was enough information for us to figure out how satellite systems work, figure out how we like run our operations, figure out how they pull this data up. Like one of the biggest discoveries of the satellite video we're looking at here is that they're beaming data from satellites, from constellations of satellites scanning the globe all the time to ground-based computers, and then they're building this map of the world, but with full video surveillance coverage.
Right.
Like the ultimate. Yeah, here it is right here.
That's really that's what we're doing.
Yeah, so in the bottom left, it says NROL 22, and we reverse engineered this and found that NROL 22 is the first launch of the space-based infrared system in 2006. I think it was Annie Jacobson that was talking about this system on Joe Rogan.
Space-based infrared system, and this is known. This is
you're
public?
looking at it right here. This is Lockheed Martin's website that you're staring at right here.
Okay,
and so this was operational in 2013.
Okay.
Well, it's not really. This is the thing. Like this is why I call it suppression.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. It's just suppressed. Like the public isn't aware. But you look at this and you look at the size of the scans. They have these scanners and they have stairs. So they can do these large, lower quality scans of huge areas. And then if they want, then they can scan in for higher quality resolution of smaller areas. And we're not just staring down through satellites. Like when we're using infrared or synthetic aperture radar is another method. Synthetic aperture radar is like basically like the dark night. When you are like using people's cell phones to like map the whole world, synthetic aperture radar is scanning down the whole world and they're rebuilding like a three-dimensional environment that you can interact with. And this should be obvious now in 2024, where it's like none of this is far beyond the paradigm of technology. Like you think about it, you go, of course the United States government's using this stuff. And here's an example of, I think, synthetic aperture radar. That's why it says XSAR radar on the bottom. And this is aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour. But this is also what we do when we send probes to like Pluto and stuff like that. We're not taking visual imagery. We're pulling data and then we're recreating the image. And that's what these constellations of satellites are doing, which should tell you there's no way in hell that a plane is disappearing in 2014 when that system was already online.
Right.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that this satellite video right here in the bottom left says NROL 22, which is the first launch of the space-based infrared system. That's a pretty weird coincidence.
Yeah, that the creator of if this was forged, that the creator would have any idea what that was.
Why would you put that down there? And here's another little fun fact. Newsweek tried to debunk this video on August 9th, 2023. This was 2 days after the videos reemerged on Reddit. So somebody at Newsweek or somebody who controls Newsweek was watching these videos reemerge, and they were like, we got to go push a debunk. And they didn't even come up with their own. They copied France 24's debunk, literally word for word. Like they used an AI to strip it. And they actually got the only fact wrong. France 24 tried to debunk this video claiming that it says NRL 33. NRL 33 wasn't launched till after the plane disappeared. So that would debunk it. But when you look, you can see it doesn't say NRL 33. It says NRL 22.
Right.
So Newsweek actually copied it incorrectly, and in their original source, like we can see on the behind here, it says NRL 33. This article used to say NRL 77, and they edited it, they modified it. You know why they modified it? because I responded to them on Twitter the day that they posted this on August 8th. Before I had any followers, I had 30 followers. I was the top reply on their post about this and said, you guys are liars. There is no NROL 77, doesn't even exist. And NROL 33 doesn't say that either in the bottom left. It was crazy because a guy that's about to testify to Congress at the UFO hearings next week, Tim, going to butcher his last name, Gallouet, it's a French thing. I can't do French names. He's like an admiral. He was on Chris Leto, and Chris Leto was asking him about these videos. And he goes, well, I read some Newsweek debunk that said that the satellite wasn't even in orbit yet or whatever. I'm going, what? Like, how are you not even, and this was well after we had already shown that it's NRL 22. It's like, so the reason why I bring this story up is, A, you're a person that's literally going to testify in Congress who was an admiral. He was tricked by a fake Newsweek debunk. And he's about to go testify next week. Actually, it'll have happened in the past by the time this airs. And he's going to tell the world, this is spoiler alert for people who didn't watch the hearing, depending a few days from now or a few days ago, depending on when you're watching this. He's just going to tell the world that these UFOs can go underwater or whatever. Cool, whatever, man. That's neat. That's like old news to me, but sure for other people, yeah, we already knew that, right? So I just bring that up because I want the audience to understand that, like, even people that they think they're kind of like on the cutting edge of disclosing this type of technology, even they are just completely in the dark about some of this stuff. And when it comes to black projects in general, which I think we're definitely going to be digging into here when we look at this stuff, admirals and generals, they are not necessarily in the know at all. I think this is one of the major misconceptions. Just because you're in the military does not mean you're in the know. I love Commander Fravor of the Nimitz incident. I think he's a very honorable, straight up guy. But when he says stuff like, I would know if we have this technology, he couldn't be more wrong. There's no chance a guy who's just a commander is going to know about this technology unless he happened to be exposed to it directly.
If people at that level know, then we know.
Yeah, exactly, because it leaks out.
Right.
It does leak out, and they know that, and that's why when you look at the bigot lists for who are in these special access programs, it's actually mostly contractors. It's like actually not the people you would expect, like the generals and navies. It's like a physicist who's like in the black project world, and these project managers for like Lockheed Martin and stuff like that. So let's go back to this video, though. I want to point out some details. If you go ahead and play the video, we can see this plane coming in right away. We can see smoke coming out of the back of it. We can tell this is smoke coming out of the back of the plane because we're looking at cumulus clouds in the background. That's a super important clue. The types of clouds in the background are low altitude clouds, which means we can't tell the exact altitude here, but we can assume very accurately that it's relatively low. And contrails only form at high altitudes, so that can't be contrails. Watching these orbs come in and dance around the plane is just the most mind-blowing thing ever, because I'm not actually even sure that even today, with today's CGI technology, that you could easily recreate the movement of the orbs around the plane. It seems like it would be very difficult. It's just too exact. And we have two videos from two completely different angles, and the orbs are in perfect synchronization in both of them. They initially start spinning around the plane, mapping it, and then they go vertical here. And then poof. Now, one thing I want to point out about that zap, you could see it illuminate. People ask, why is it illuminating? That is a weird detail. Why would it flash? Not only does it flash, the flash accurately illuminates the entire environment in 3 dimensions. This is another detail that shows that we're looking at real clouds. We're looking at 3-dimensional clouds, and we're not looking at a 2-dimensional picture here. This is not a 2-dimensional visual effect that was added to this video. And we know because somebody tried to do a recreation of this, and this is one of the things they messed up. The biggest things they messed up was the plane, the orbs around the plane, and the zap being accurately illuminated in 3 dimensions. It's very, very difficult, especially in 2014, to get this type of accurate zap. Now, why is this happening? It took several months to get to dig into the science to find out. There's something called the dynamic Casimir effect and the Schwinger effect, which would say that if you achieve a certain level of electromagnetic intensity, energy levels, that you can essentially break through the fabric of reality to the underlying framework and pull real photons directly out of, I'm going to call it the ether. I like to call it the ether, but this idea that there's energy there. And what happens when you're pulling real photons out of the ether? A flash. So why are we seeing a flash here? Because we're breaking through the fabric of reality, breaking the Schwinger limit, And the virtual photons that current physics knows are there, we're pulling them straight out of the ether, manifesting them into our reality just like that. And that's exactly what we would expect from the dynamic Casimir effect is what we see right there. So to me, that is just absolutely incredible. It turns out scientifically, this is what we would expect to see from like a wormhole. Now, you could still argue that this is some type of annihilation event. Like, if you let this play, you can see that the smoke stops right there. It doesn't keep going. I kind of wish the smoke kept going, because then I could be like, oh, we cloaked the plane, and, it must be there. They zoom over to the right, and it just to kind of show you there's nothing here. Like, there's no smoke, there's no plane. And then the cursor goes to the top right again, and then the screen goes dark. This is actually still playing in the background, but the screen's just dark for like another minute. This tells me that the start, stop, record button was right up there in the top right, because the mouse initially comes off from that location in the beginning, and at the end, it goes back to the top right as well.
Okay.
See that? Do that right there. And because the mouse goes off the bottom left and the top right, we know we're looking at a much larger field of view. Which means if someone faked this using cloud pictures, they would have had to stitch all the pictures together and then do some kind of weird recording over the top of it. That doesn't make any sense unless it's real. Especially because we realize that cursor is at 24 frames per second and the background is at 6 frames per second. This indicates that why would the background be at a different frame rate than the cursor? Well, because it's a Citrix session and they're on a computer remotely logged in to a remote terminal session. Right there, see how this orb doesn't quite, right at the beginning, the orb kind of circles around the plane. This is clearly some kind of tracking and homing mechanism. It hasn't locked in on the plane, and it does one orientation, one spin on the side of the plane, and then it locks in. So go ahead and play it. So you'll see this spin, and then it locks in on the plane, and now it's revolving around the plane. And now the second and third orbs appear right away, and they are immediately locking on the plane. I think that's just an amazing detail. It tells me that whatever technology this is, we have tracking and homing and vectoring capabilities that are far beyond what the public understands right now. Because they're doing this in a three-dimensional environment. The first orb comes in at almost hypersonic speeds, thousands of miles per hour, and then immediately slows down and matches the speed of the plane perfectly. And this speed of the plane isn't even flying at cruising speed. It's turning, we can see it turning, it's descending, and it's flying low. So these things, it's actually kind of slow, the same way where if you're in a car turning around a bank, you have to slow down. Same idea here. It's only going about 150 to 250 miles per hour on the bank. What other details do I want to point out here?
Is it when it's mapping the plane? Is it and they keep going around and around and around? Is it creating? It's creating an image of the plane, I guess. Is it almost from a spherical standpoint?
I think so, because when you people did so much analysis in these videos a year ago, it kind of blew me away, where people mapped out the orientations of the orbs, and they found if you squeeze time down, it actually is making a spherical pattern around the plane, which to me would say, yes, it must be mapping it, right? Mm-hmm. That's the logical conclusion. Mm-hmm. I imagine it's trying to find the center of mass of the plane, because they're trying to figure out how big does the zap have to be to encompass the entire plane. In my opinion, what's being produced there is the mouth of a wormhole, and you have to make sure the mouth of the wormhole is big enough so that the whole plane's going to go through it.
Dude.
Otherwise, you're going to have a situation like Philadelphia experiment where people are trapped in the walls, right? Stuck in the wall.
Right.
One of the things you learn about wormholes when you dig into them is they are safe if you're in the middle of the wormhole. If you're on the edge of the wormhole, probably not going to go well. Don't touch the wall of the wormhole. People out there that if you're going to go if you're planning to go through a wormhole.
Yeah. How long does the whole mapping process take?
That's the other thing too, is that if this was a destructive event, I would imagine it'd be much quicker.
Yeah.
Like an interception, boom, it's gone. As opposed to this whole video is about a minute long, so the mapping part's less than 30 seconds. It's pretty quick, but it's still a significant portion of time that it takes to do that. One other detail I want to point out here as well is that people claim they found a model of a Boeing 777. Well, of course, a real Boeing 777 is going to look like a model of a Boeing 777. That's the point. But then they use that model and they put it in this video to do a recreation, and it didn't match. And the funny part is, you know why it doesn't match? Because we're looking at infrared right here. And when planes fly in the sky, they radiate infrared radiation. They actually, the higher up you are and the longer you're in the air, the more infrared radiation you collect. So that's why the plane looks so bulky. It's kind of bulgy a little bit. That's the reason why, because it's literally radiating infrared. And this is another reason why this is absolutely real. If it was a fake video, we would see a stick figure of a plane that wouldn't look normal. But in this case, that's the reason why it looks bulky.
So right here where we see the two trails of smoke coming out of the back, if that was one question that I had, was if this were a fire event as opposed to engine exhaust, would we see one trail or two trails? Are the engines pulling the
Let's talk
smoke?
about that when we get to the second video,
Okay.
because there's actually a really powerful clue. In fact, maybe we just go to the second video right now. So this first video leaks. To me, that's absolute proof. There's enough evidence in that video that like it should have been investigated right away, but it gets ignored. So now, 2 to 3 weeks later, this video comes out. We can see the drone right there. Like that is a MQ-1 Reaper, Gray Eagle, some version of drone. We can tell the camera's under the wing. We can tell that there's a real operator controlling this camera. So this is being manually controlled. So
to the left, you've got the point, the nose of the drone itself, and then above at the beginning, Ryan.
If you scroll back, if you go back towards the beginning again real quick, because there's just so much detail in these videos. Like, again, we're looking at real clouds in the background here. This is nighttime. We're looking at it in thermal because it's nighttime. In fact, that's one of the reasons. You can see the heat signature on the brain of the drone there on the left as well. To me, that is like way too specific. Unless you understand how these drones look, operate, that's where the brain is, that's going to heat up like that. I don't even know how you could come up with that.
So that part opens up?
Yeah, that opens up. The lid opens up right there.
Right.
And so it's like, why are we seeing that heat signature there? Because the heat is seeping out through this little crack on the side of the drone, the nose of the drone. And we can't tell if we're looking at the wing or if we're looking at like the housing of the camera. A lot of these cameras, like they protrude out a little bit so you can actually see like the housing of the camera on there. But we can tell this plane flies this drone flies directly under the smoke. If you let it play here, the smoke stacks up accurately. So you're going to see this smoke get whiter or hotter as the kind of like right here, it stacks up on the right. And you can actually see the shake of the drone as well. These drones are actually very, very stable. If you guys go look at drone videos in general, even like commercial ones, you'll see that they're very stable in those situations as well, but there is some visible shake. Just watching these orbs is wild. Crazy, so pause this for just a second if you don't mind. Once the plane's in view, if you don't let it go, So the person manually controlling the camera is a huge, huge detail, because you can tell there's a real person controlling this camera. There's a camera lag as well when they like zoom in and some of this. You can tell they're struggling to keep the plane in view. Just a second ago, the plane wasn't there, right? It was off the screen. Because this person's struggling. When you look at hoax videos, almost always the object of focus is in the center of the entire time. Like that's a good indicator, because someone took real footage and they superimposed something over the real footage is usually what they do. In this case, that's not happening. Now these orbs, we're starting to see why they're filming in infrared, because right away, right here, you can already tell we're not looking at a metallic sphere. You see this gradient color change between like light blue and green on these orbs. This is telling us that this thing is like a ball of energy that we're looking at right here, as opposed to just like when you look at the plane, you see a little bit of an outline, but you can really clearly see the heat signature of the plane as it sticks out. When we zoom in even more, we're going to see the heat signature of these orbs that's going to be indicative of cold fusion and what Bob Greenyer has talked to you about as well. Now, the last detail I want to point out here, and we're going to talk about these smoke trails when we zoom in further, but there are dark lines that you can barely see in this version of the video, but you can see these dark lines kind of around the orbs. These are actually leading the orbs forward. This is probably one of the biggest clues. There's another version of this video that you guys can find on my YouTube and that I show sometimes where we change the color gradient to show you much more clearly that these dark lines are leading the orbs forward. Kind of like in the movie Donnie Darko. I don't know if you ever saw that. But in Donnie Darko, weirdly, a plane crashes into his house and it becomes this time travel type event where he can start to see the geodesic path of his future. Like this weird thing comes out from in front of him and he's following it, and it's like following his future path. That's what these orbs are doing. They are creating a geodesic well, like a gravitational well in front of them and going forward. There's never, not in sci-fi, not in real thing, never been anything like this before, ever seen. Which should be a good indication that what we're looking at here is actually authentic. It's actually real, whatever it is, if there's an explanation for it. And it turns out there is. The answer is negative energy. The answer is the reason why these are dark, cold lines coming out in front of them, they're producing a negative energy well in front of them. And that's causing it to be like a little path that just they slide into, pretty much.
So speed makes no difference. So,
and then the question, how do they control their speed? Well, I would imagine they control it with whatever laser or whatever they're using to create that geodesic path. Like the more you pull out the energy from the region in front of you, the faster that you're gonna go. So imagine like you're changing the refractive index of the medium itself. By doing that, you change the speed of light. So the more energy you pull out of there, the refractive index changes more, the speed of light increases more. So the more energy you're pulling out of there, the faster you're gonna go when you're going through that region. So I imagine all they need to control their speed and the direction is just a laser beaming in any 360-degree direction. And then the question is, well, what's controlling them, this and the other one? I mean, they're in this perfect triangle formation. To me, there's not anybody inside these orbs. There's no aliens, there's no people. This is being controlled, remote controlled, by probably a supercomputer or an AI or a quantum computer, something that's very powerful that can run real-time updates in a three-dimensional environment. And so that's how I think these are being controlled. And these are already some of the main reasons why I think this is our technology, United States government technology.
Lockheed Martin.
I think that I would point directly at Lockheed Martin. Yeah, but there's other people that I suspect as well. Like, you know, just let's not leave Lockheed Martin out there by themselves. Even
Raytheon,
General Atomics, who produced the drone, they are way into cold fusion, way more than what people think. Raytheon, who makes some of the cameras and the sensors. Radar is not just a detection mechanism, it's also a energy projection mechanism. Northrop Grumman, even Boeing, they have something called Phantom Works. All of these defense contractors, they've been working on anti-gravity related stuff since like 1973, the Mansfield Amendment. That's when the military was no longer allowed to research applications that were not military related, not weapons related. So what that meant was that everything anti-gravity related went to the private defense contractors. It had to. And that's why we've reached this point now where we're in this UFO world where we look at stuff like this and we all go, well, that's aliens. We can't understand that. Well, the reason why we can't understand that is because the secrets are locked up in private companies that are working with our government that are completely immune to FOIA requests. There is no way to get this information out from them. And this is why no matter how much we talk to our government and demand that they give us the answers, they don't have them. They don't have anything that they have to say because it's all at Lockheed Martin, it's all in Northrop Grumman, and
so
all those other people.
Who is it? Who is it that is in contact with Lockheed Martin? Who is this group of people? It's not the government. It's not Congress. It's not the president. Who is it?
I like to call them the covert administrative elite. Some people call them the deep state or whatever you want to call them. When you really get down to the truth, it's a lot murkier than what the public. It's so easy to say, well, it's the government doing evil stuff. But really, when you look at this administrative elite, it's like people that are in the know, some people that have been exposed to this technology in the know in various branches of the military. And it's not necessarily the generals and the admirals, but it could be people that are other levels that like they were part of some secret spy plane program or something, right? And then you have the people at the top in the government that do know is obviously the president has to be read in on this stuff. At least read it on the fact that we have these kinds of super weapons. The people that would claim that like Trump must not know or he would let it spill, you guys are wrong. Sorry. He knows. I'm sure of it. Like Obama knew when we took this plane out. Whether or not he ran the operation is unlikely, but the director of national intelligence and the director of the CIA, they are generally in the know as well. And they would shoot information from like the NSA and the stuff where they're collecting the satellite imagery back up to the president. And they would say, hey, Obama, we teleported this plane away. We need you now to go do damage control. And then Obama would be the one to come up with the White House would come up with the policy. And they would say, okay, I'm going to go visit Malaysia next month. By the way, he did in April. And I'm going to smooth it over with Prime Minister Najib. And we're going to have Najib go and lie on national television. And, you know, we're going to say that the plane went into the South Indian Ocean in the middle of nowhere. We'll have some people leak it to the CNN. And then the other people that are involved are going to be like the people in the know, probably the top type people that are in these defense contractors or other third-party contractors, and then generally just rich people who are in the know. Like if you really want to get into the know on this type of technology, my advice would be get in touch with the engineers. The Black Project engineers, they're the ones in the know. Forget about the Lou Elizondos and the David Grushes. Like those are the ones that, for show. Like if you want to hear some fun stories. If you want to know how the science and stuff works and how we're building this stuff, then you want to be talking to Eric W. Davis, Hal Puthoff, these guys that have been working in Black projects for decades and decades, and they have scientific papers that explain all of this stuff. That was the thing that surprised me the most, is that you look into this deep state and you go, well, how are they hiding all this? And the answer is they're not. It's all in the open. All the scientific papers are published publicly. Technically, like how they put the orbs together, that's secret, but the science around 0-point energy and how you can manipulate gravity and all these other types of effects that we're seeing here, it's all out there. Like Eric Davis, 2004, wrote a paper for the Air Force Research Laboratory called Teleportation Physics Study. And he basically breaks down all the different types of teleportation, including sci-fi teleportation, which is like Star Trek, where you're like dematerializing and then rebuilding something from the ground up. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, here it is. Oh man, you're on it.
Ryan's good, man.
Ryan, you are solid, sir. So look at this paper. Eric W. Davis, Teleportation Physics Study, Air Force Research Laboratory. Now, if you scroll down a little bit, I don't remember which page it's on, but there's a list of all the different types of teleportation. And actually right here, if you stop right here, Frank Mead, I see this guy as listed on project manager on so many of these Air Force Research Lab papers. That's another rabbit hole that people can go down. Like I feel like I'm so close to figuring out like the whole history of all this UFO technology stuff. Frank Mead is right at the middle of it. And I think he's passed away now, but he was looking at a lot. So yeah, there's the teleportation types. If you just go back up to that, we can use that as an example.
Did he get hit by a car or something? Or
I think he died of natural causes in this particular case. Okay. If you're like in the know like this, you're relatively protected. Yeah. The people that are getting hit by the cars are the ones that are like building free energy devices in their home, and producing cold fusion at their home, and then trying to go talk to CNN about it. That's what they don't like you doing. Right. These types of people, these engineers, they will sell stuff to people behind the scenes that's like magic. Like they can make you a free energy device if you know the right engineer. And the rest of the world just thinks that that's just not possible. But the people who are in this covert elite, or they know the people, these engineers, I mean, I've seen stuff directly that I know for a fact that this is happening, right? If there's a billionaire out there that has the right connections, they probably know all this stuff is real. They know we've got magical technology. And the crazy part is I've been in conversations listening to these people, and they talk like you and I do, but they talk about stuff like this as if it's just common knowledge. Whereas the rest of the world would say, like, this is totally insane. It can't be real. So we've got the real type of teleportation is VM teleportation right there at the top. Engineering the space-time metric, wormhole thin shell formalization, and exotic matter energy requirements. They're talking about negative energy right there. So right off the bat here, I'm going, this guy in 2004 named Eric W. Davis was basically explaining everything we're seeing in these videos. Like how is that possible? And it's about manipulating the medium, not about disassembling something and rebuilding it from scratch. It's about, you've got your fish in your fish bowl. Don't pick the fish out and try to throw the fish into somewhere else. Pick up the whole fish bowl and move the fish bowl somewhere else. Now the fish isn't moving anymore. You're just moving the fish bowl. That's what space-time engineering is. And Eric Davis here is the chief scientist for Hal Puthoff, who is probably the godfather of all this UFO technology. Now, Q teleportation, I think that might be the Star Trek one. I can't, or the fake one or what have you. But some of these other teleportation sites, like P teleportation is like psychic teleportation, which is more along the lines of like remote viewing type stuff as well. Because once you start to realize that like teleportation is not just a sci-fi thing, you realize like, how can we explain that? How can you explain that it's possible for an object to go from here to over here faster than the speed of light? One of the only ways to rationalize it is something that Ben Rich told people. Ben Rich was the director of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works for like 16 years. And he basically was telling people, like, we have the capability to go across the universe, to take ET home, anything you can imagine. We've already figured it out, but it's hidden in black projects. And people are asking him, like, why are you saying this? Like, what do you mean? How can this be possible? And he tells the guy, he says, well, how is ESP possible? And the guy thinks about it for a second, and he goes, I don't know. All points in space and time are connected? And he goes, exactly. And you think about it, you go, yeah, that has to be the answer, right? Like, that's the only way that somebody could teleport from one place to the next. Somehow, on another level, another dimension, all points that we're seeing are connected. Basically, our reality is a hologram. It's a projection that's coming from a lower level, flat plane that we're all next to each other. We don't realize it, projecting out onto our three-dimensional reality. So this paper is amazing. I do want to go back to the satellite or the drone video if we can watch, because I want to show you guys the most important part. So let's play this. Let this play out. And we'll go and look at the smoke stuff. So this camera operator is going to zoom in here in a second. You can actually see the dark lines pretty clearly right now in front of the orbs spinning around. Go ahead and you just keep. Yeah, exactly. And then the plane goes off the screen. Person's struggling to keep it in view, and now they're zooming in further, and then boom. And now if you pause it again, I just noticed something else I've never noticed before. Actually, this is a perfect pause, by the way.
It's a big TV. You notice,
which is that I think we've confirmed it must be cropped. Why? How is the person able to zoom in, and then all of a sudden the plane is on the screen zoomed in? The answer is they saw the edge of the plane on the edge of the screen that is cropped out. That must be what it is. So it's actually, we know now it's cropped on the left and right side. Because the person who was watching it, they must have seen more than what we're seeing. Because otherwise, when they're zooming in, there's nothing there. How do you know the plane's about to appear into your view? Probably because on the right, they could see the nose of the plane get bigger or smaller. So when you zoom in here, this is perfect view of everything I want to show. Look at the heat signature in the middle of the plane. That's not the engine on the other side. That's also not heat coming out of the engine either. You can see there's a clear disconnect between the engine and this heat signature. This is the hot smoke coming out of the belly of the plane. There are two AC exhaust ports right there, right next to the landing gear. So if there's a fire in the forward cargo bay where the lithium-ion batteries are, it's in a contained cell that's built for fires. But as Billy Vincent told me, in the UPS Flight 6 case, it melted the wall, part of the wall of one of these containment zones. And what happened was it damaged the electrical systems. What we think is happening then is the smoke is being flushed out of the AC system, and then it's wrapping around the hull of the plane on both sides. And how do we know that? Look at the smoke as it comes off the back of the plane. It's offset from where the engine is. It's a little bit higher up. So you can actually see the smoke wrapping around the plane here and then going off back through the side of it, which of course then in the satellite video makes it look like it's coming from the engine, seeing two distinct trails there. But when you look at this here, you can tell, oh no, it's actually coming from the middle. So very huge clue. Now the orb, look at that orb. Holy crap. You can see the clear outline of the orb, even in the blue cold area. Now right away, the temperature here is almost ambient. This is basically room temperature, except for this, I don't know, crescent, half crescent green area, which is similar to the skin of the plane. This is where Bob Grenier came in. And before I even met Bob Grenier, he did a video analysis of these videos because somebody I knew or I interviewed with told him to look at it. And he was blown away because when you look at cold fusion reactions, that heat signature is exactly what they're seeing. In fact, if you go to the Department of Energy's website, you will find an orb signature, heat signature looks remarkably similar to that, where not only does it wrap around like an umbrella, but then it kind of like comes back in, where you can see in kind of the edges, there's like this flat where it cuts back in like this. And this is the real secret of these videos, is that how would anyone even come up with what we're looking at on that heat signature right there? Where Bob Grenier, probably one of the top low energy nuclear reaction experts, which by the way is just cold fusion rebranded. You know, he's looking at this going, this is the Ukana Vasara. This is the Tesla symbol that we expect to see, because this is a vortex that is being created within this orb. And the more I dug into this science, I had no idea about anything about cold fusion a year ago. Now I know more than I think I would ever have known. But you find this guy, Ken Shoulders, who is connected to Hal Puthoff, and he had been researching exotic vacuum objects back in the 80s. And in 1980, he was working with Hal Puthoff, and he found this guy, Bergstrom, his scientific paper from 1973, where he and Hal Puthoff, Ken Shoulders, Hal Puthoff, had this epiphany. They realized space is not empty. They realized there really is an ether. The ether is filled with this energy, and what this means is that space is a medium. And this idea is what stirred Ken Shoulders to try to research plasma, what he called EVs or EVOs. He said that in these plasma states, electrons begin to clump together in a way that they shouldn't naturally, that they should be repelling each other, but they're not. And they're creating this natural asymmetry. And he believed that he saw that they would create these self-organizing structures. And the self-organizing shape that would be created was a sphere, because they were creating a magnetic monopole. So normally a bar magnet, shoots around up north to south. In the case of a magnetic monopole, it's just the north or just the south. So all the magnetic fields either go outward or inward. And that's what we're looking at right there. And so,
as opposed to a dipole.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I think that what happened, the history of this, if you look at this, and it just blows me away to look at this every time, is that Ken Shoulders' work got weaponized. I think that we suppressed cold fusion in 1989. We knew it was real. We knew that negative energy was the answer to achieve cold fusion, which is fusion temperatures that are much lower than the temperature of the sun. I mean, look what we're looking at here. It's not even red. It's not even the same heat signature as the engine. So this is room temperature. And that we figured out that plasma has these magical properties, and that it's not even hard to create. It's like once you figured it out, it's like figuring out fire. It's like before you understand how to make fire, it would seem magical, the first person that rubs two sticks together. You go, whoa, how do you do that? Once you've learned, now it's easy. Now we've got a lighter that can do it, you know? And that's what I think is going to happen with this plasma here. So we'll come back to that in a second, but I want to finish this video. So we've shown those pieces of evidence. And so watch the orb spin around the video and go ahead and hit play here. And notice, imagine you're the camera operator. Why are they zooming out right here? Well, they know something's about to happen. And then poof. Wow. And if you can go to, I think the end of this video has like a slow-mo version of that. Yeah, like past this. But this is also part of the original video, is like they do this weird zoom in on that. Okay, here you go. Yeah, play this out. So look at that collapse of the orbs, and then look at, so right here, the orbs are reorienting, which is why they're going blurry. And then all of a sudden they pop out of that, and you can see the heat signature again clearly, and then they converge on the plane. And then you can actually see the gravitational lensing in the frame right before this. If you go back a couple of frames. One more for that one right there. Look at how they're blurred, and the orbs are flat now, and the plane is blurred as well. Look, they're actually creating an electromagnetic field that's causing gravitational lensing. Or lensing, maybe it's not, if you don't want to call it gravitational, it's just a lensing effect happening right there. Why are they even collapsing on the plane? Well, we found just a week ago a video from Bob Lazar, who, yeah, everybody has their own opinions on Bob Lazar. I happen to think he's at least mostly authentic. But he was saying that these UFOs would have 3 gravitational beams on them. And the way they would work is they would take their 3 beams and they would converge them together, and they would pull a distant point in space towards them. This is explaining a wormhole. The amazing part about this video of Bob Lazar is that I think this predates Miguel Alcubierre's warp drive paper in 1994, which is huge. Because if Bob Lazar was talking about warp drives and wormholes before the math was even done to show that it's a real solution to Einstein's general relativity, that's impressive. The fact that Bob Lazar is talking about them converging together, and that's what we're seeing here, made me look into the science of it. And you find out there's something called Coulomb's force. Turns out the equation for Coulomb's law, which is electrical forces, has the same exact form as the equation for gravity. The force equals a constant times either mass 1 or mass 2 or charge 1 times charge 2 divided by distance squared, r squared, which means that they both fall off at the inverse square law. The further away you get, the force becomes exponentially weaker. Now, the opposite is true as well. The closer you get, the more powerful the force gets, exponentially more powerful. So what's happening in those videos? The answer is clear. Same way if I were to take two magnets that are same polarity and jam them together, I'm going to have an extremely powerful repulsive force. That's what those orbs are doing right there. And how this all comes together between the plasmas and everything, all the science is connected, is that you have Coulomb repulsion. This is what should be forcing electrons to reflect. The same reason why where I jam my hand on this chair, my hand doesn't go flying through the chair. Why? Because the electrons in my hand are bouncing off the electrons or repelling the electrons from the chair. Otherwise, I would fall right through it. So you jamming your orbs together, creating this Coulomb repulsion, but at the same time, you're creating something called a Casimir cavity. So you create this Casimir bubble, and the Casimir effect wants to attract together. So you've got the Coulomb force repelling apart, and you've got the Casimir force pulling things together. Theoretically, these can offset. And now if they offset at a certain region, you create a bubble. You could create a bubble around an area. That's exactly what I think those orbs are doing right there. I think they're creating a Casimir shell, as we would call it, which is the equilibrium point between the Coulomb repulsion and the Casimir attraction. And I don't know that anybody can really debunk this, although I think people will argue and say that, well, no, the electrical forces are so much more smaller or what have you. But what you have to realize, and this is something I think Bob Grenier told you, is that it's scale invariant, these forces, which means that they work the same way on tiny scales as they do on large scales. And if that's the case, then the difference between these small forces of an electron is the size. So you could almost argue that what we're looking at with those orbs is a large electron, very large, upscaled electron. It turns out that Ken Shoulders, in his plasma research, he strongly believed what was causing the electrons to clump together was some type of Casimir attraction offsetting the Coulomb repulsion. So you're starting to see now that, oh, it's all the same science that is connecting these concepts. And I sent you a link last night. I don't think we have the video up right here right now. Brand new information just saw last night. I was watching an interview of Ken Shoulders talking to John Hutchinson. And around 22 minutes and 30 seconds into this video, he says, we saw these EVOs disappearing things. What? Wow. Because now you're saying like people were experimenting. And he says, we saw it in the lab, disappearing things. Bob Grenier's talked about this as well. Bob Grenier's view of those videos is that it's probably annihilation, but it could be teleportation. My view is the opposite, is that I'm pretty sure we're looking at teleportation, just like Bob Lazar said. You converge them together and you have a fourth orb somewhere else, and that's where you determine the vector of travel, where it's going to show up. In fact, that's why people call me, my name's Ashton Forbes, but they call me Ashton Four Orbs now because my buddy Dave Rossi promoted this theory of the fourth orb must be where they determine the direction of travel. And he went on Tim Pool with me last year, and he's a DoD defense contractor and engineer himself. He's a very connected guy. And he told me he's seen these experiments in the labs as well. Like literally, he's talking about teleportation. So I'm hoping that in the future, when people start to understand that this science is real, which they will because science is a discovery, that as we understand that teleportation is a real thing and not just Star Trek sci-fi stuff, that people look back at these videos and go, okay, maybe those videos are what happened on the plane. Maybe that is why we didn't find it anywhere, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just a couple questions to close out the first part.
Yep.
So the three orbs circling around the plane and then one more orb in the distance. How does it transport?
Yeah. So our best understanding, there's two ways of looking at it. One is that when these orbs are squeezing in on the plane, there's some finite amount of force that's allowing this medium to be manipulated, where then that would determine where the plane shows up. This is what I could call the Bob Grenier explanation, which is what Bob Grenier believes, is that, you know, as they're squeezing together, how fast they squeeze together will determine how powerful the electromagnetic fields are, and that this is ideally would be like taking a turkey baster, squeeze the turkey baster, and the stuff shoots out. At some point, it's just going to go wherever it goes, and it's going to stop. The other thought, which was the theory that Dave Rossi proposed, my friend Dave Rossi, said that, well, you have this fourth orb, and that orb would be entangled to the other orbs, quantum entanglement. And so therefore, when those three orbs break the Schwinger limit by converging together and creating this endothermic event that we saw before the break, that is then snapping that location of that plane to the location of wherever that fourth orb is at. I think what we're really getting here down to here now is like, what are the limitations of this technology? Are there limitations of this technology? And I think that's one of the most amazing parts, is that I think that there are. I think that this technology is not infinite in power, although it's close. But I think that even as amazing as it is to say that we teleported a Boeing 777 in 2014, that's just the beginning. You may be limited, these orbs might be limited to planet Earth, in the sense that they may be pulling like hydrogen or another element out of the atmosphere, out of the water, to create the ball of plasma that they're doing. They might be pulling the energy from the environment. If that's the case, then maybe they can't work in outer space, or maybe they need another variation of this technology to work in outer space. If we do need a fourth orb, then we have another limitation now. Now that we need to get that fourth orb to wherever we want our destination to be, which kind of rules out Andromeda Galaxy. It's like, how am I going to get that orb to the Andromeda Galaxy, right? So then you look at it, well, how could you make this even better? And I say, well, what if we found out that certain points in space and time were already entangled, and we could manipulate existing entanglement? What if we found out that one point in space and time in the Andromeda Galaxy is entangled to this point right here in front of me? And then we can manipulate that entanglement and use that now as our virtual fourth orb, and I can now teleport to the Andromeda Galaxy. This opens the door to stuff like stargates. Like, I would actually go so far as to say, I think that most of what we see in Star Trek, a lot of what we see in Star Wars, and basically everything we see in Stargate, SG-1, or whatever Stargate TV show you like, are all real physics that is just beyond where we're currently at right now, at least from what the public understands. And that's why I do what I do in terms of these conversations. I've never been paid for any podcast. I've never actually sold anything on any podcast before either. I just want to wake people up to, like, we have this technology that's out there. It's consistent with physics that exists, that is peer-reviewed scientific papers, even the more esoteric aspects of what we've been discussing. And we need to catch up to that from the public perspective. We're so far behind now that we shouldn't be looking at those MH370 videos and immediately thinking aliens. We should be looking at those videos and going, well, the United States government's filming this. The person who's controlling this drone video obviously knows something's going to happen. This implicates humans being involved. And also, to your point, I think we were talking about at dinner last night. It's like, how do you know this is not aliens? Like, what can you steel man the argument that it could be aliens as well? And I think one of the big reasons is that if aliens exist and they have technology that's this far beyond the paradigm, which I think that makes sense that they would, then why would they care about us at all? Like, to them, we're just ants. Like, do you go to the jungle and start messing with the tigers in the jungle? No, you don't care, right? Like, who gives a crap about that?
Yeah, I'm way past aliens for this specific this specific event. I don't think aliens are at all necessary. And maybe we get into like why this specific plane was targeted next, and that can kind of explain why aliens wouldn't be necessary. But I mean, yeah, if the government today did not have technology that we didn't know about, that was more advanced than what we know about, that would be the first time in human history that it was
two
the
big
case.
things that I think are great points to point out here for people is that, one, everybody agrees the military and government has technology that's decades beyond the public.
Right.
What does that look like?
Right.
That's what people should be thinking about. What does that look like? What if it looks like what we were looking at in those videos? I think that is exactly what it looks like. The other thing, too, is that every scientific theory in history, every scientist, every era in scientific history has been certain that they have it all figured out. And every single time, they've been proven wrong. We went from Isaac Newton's theory of gravity to Einstein's theory of general relativity. And now we're going to move from there to this world of 0-point energy and 0-point fluctuations, which simply do the same thing that Einstein did to Newton. It expands upon general relativity, and it unifies the very small, the quantum, with the stuff that we see that's very large, the macroscopic. And all the papers that prove it have already been published. I think that you could argue there's no less than half a dozen, maybe even more independent scientists that have all figured this out. And they all have slightly different concepts and views on how the zero-point energy explains gravity, mass, inertia, dark energy, dark matter, etc. So.
Yeah. So why was the plane?
Why this plane?
Yeah, who was on the plane, and why did the U.S. government go after it?
There's a couple groups that stick out right off the bat. I'm not sure if people really know about this, but there were 2 Iranian passengers that were on stolen passports on this plane that were traveling together. They'd paid tens of thousands of dollars for the passports and for the tickets. They knew each other. They both changed their appearance to look like the people in the stolen passports. To me, those people red flags should have been going up. These people got dismissed in under 48 hours by the official investigation. And they claimed that these people were going to Amsterdam as refugees or something like that, which makes no sense because they're going from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. There's a direct flight to Amsterdam from Kuala Lumpur. Why would you risk going through a communist country where you could get caught at any moment? Why would you risk any of that? It makes no sense. And we're not really happy with Iran at the moment. They're very interesting. I still don't know exactly how to tie them together, but if this is some type of espionage event where the United States government is involved, you might need operatives on board the plane while you're hijacking it or preparing to do what you do to keep everybody calm so that people aren't going to rise up or what have you. The other group that's really interesting is the 20 Freescale semiconductor engineers on board this plane. There is a conspiracy theory that's out there that is close, but actually also false, that claims that there were 4 engineers on board this plane and that some patent reverted to the Rothschilds or something like that. Well, it turns out there was not 4 people. There was 20 people from this company. Turns out those 4 people in general from that conspiracy theory were not even on the plane. It also turns out that's not how patents work either. The individuals do not own the patent when it's in the name of the company itself. But the rest of it's pretty much true, which is that the motive for taking this plane is definitely 20 engineers from an American Freescale semiconductor company that produces extremely powerful microchips, that has contracts with U.S. Aerospace and Defense, that was named in a 2005 National Security Agency report about the emergence of superconductive microchips. Why is superconductive microchip so important? Because superconductivity, zero electrical resistance, is a quantum effect at the macroscopic level. So you're taking magic, like stuff like quantum entanglement, teleportation, and you're seeing it visually at a macroscopic level that we can observe. And the theory is that these guys, they had just produced a microchip smaller than the dimple in a golf ball, like smaller than like the head of my nail here.
At what company?
Freescale Semiconductors.
Okay, got it.
20 of them, way too many people for one plane. 8 of them are Chinese nationals, 12 are Malaysian nationals. They're all working for the American company, Freescale Semiconductors. The story goes, these people were defecting to China, or they were bringing the technology and intellectual property to China, and that the United States government knew that it was going to happen, and they planned out an operation in advance to prevent it from happening. Now, did that operation go as planned? Couldn't say. There's a lot of gaps that only the United States government can say why. Why risk this? Why do this? Why break out the orbs? Why do all this, right? When it comes to why questions, I can only speculate to some degree, but I can add in what evidence leads me to come to those conclusions. The biggest thing that shifted me away from thinking this was like an accidental fire where we bring the orbs in to rescue it or whatever was something called Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes. Is by far the creepiest thing I've ever had happen to me. I had you listen to it last night.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing. Just about 10, 11 minutes.
Every time I listen to it, I've listened to it 50 times, like the hair stands over my arms. Yeah. There's a part in this letter where it's like, "Hi, Ashton, impressive." It's like, it's like one of those, like, I don't even know, just too freaky. And as time has gone on, I've become more and more convinced that letter is legit. When I say legit, I'm not saying that every detail has to be accurate. I'm saying that this was somebody in the know, either a foreign intelligence agency or our intelligence agency in the United States, sending me a message. It was clearly a message of inspiration and one meant to keep me going.
When was it sent and what did it say?
January 9th, I want to say. And basically the way it played out,
2024.
Yeah, just this year. The way it played out was like this YouTube account appears. It has these very highly produced AI videos. Now the scripts themselves don't read as AI. The voice is clearly AI, but the scripts read like somebody was doing a creative writing class and came up with this stuff. And it seemed like they were trying to get my attention because they were talking about the Miami Mall aliens incident in January. And I had posted about it, got like 10 million views on it. Turned out to be this kind of maybe hoax, weird social media thing going on. And the letter was so, like, I want to say they weren't mad at me, but they were like admonishing me for, like, if you want to talk about Miami Mall aliens, do that. But this is like way better if you want to like talk about this. So they had these couple of videos about that. And then there's this video just called Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes, like specifically to me. The other videos weren't to anybody else. And then after that, there was a couple other videos that kind of clarified some of the questions that people had. So clearly the person that sent this video was watching because I was doing streams on it, talking about it, trying to dissect it. And then the last two videos they did were about the glitter conspiracy. And they argued that the glitter, like, there's this weird conspiracy about glitter where like only a couple companies in the whole United States, both based in New Jersey, make glitter. And they have basically a hidden customer, which turns out to be the U.S. military. And that they're like able to produce stuff that's very small and potentially even like put it into drugs and stuff like that to control people's behaviors, which was pretty far out there, but interesting. And then the other one was about Chan Thomas. And Chan Thomas was one of these people that predicted like the magnetic poles flipping and cataclysm and believed that he could predict earthquakes and stuff. Adam and Eve story, yeah. And then channel went dark. So under a week after they posted this video, channel went dark, still dark to this day. You can go find it. I think the video to me has got like 30,000 views now at this point. But the other videos have very few. So to me, you know, it's crazy to think about the letter because the letter poses, it's like if I had the biggest super fan ever, like looking through my evidence and knew everything that I had researched. And the reason why this is so odd, which I think outside people won't quite understand, is that I interact with a lot of people, my own fans. And when people, even people that support me, try to like present the arguments for why the videos are real, usually they get a couple things wrong here or there. Small things don't really matter that much. But this person, they knew like everything. And they presented this idea that this had been an espionage event from the very beginning. And at this point, before this, I had been proposing the idea that the United States was saving the airplane from certain doom. It was going to try to land on the ocean, rip apart. Everybody was going to die. But then you start to look at it from this perspective of espionage, and you're like, huh, that does kind of make a lot of sense. Like we have been at adversarial towards China over the last 10 years.
Since this happened.
Yep. You can imagine that, to your point, do other countries have this technology? You can imagine if one country does, the other ones are going to try to figure out how to reproduce it. And I would think that China is probably number 2 right now. Like Russia, you know, probably a third in line at this point. China's smart.
So this video, a letter to Ashton, is a voice recording, AI created, and kind of explains a new theory for you, which is the possibility of, or going down that same path of espionage, deeper down that path, where it basically says that that was the reason that this plane was taken down, and that it was done right in front of the Chinese government. China was watching the plane flight, and that we did this as a big kind of just...
So they would have been monitoring it, because if China was getting ready to take these people, they would have been monitoring the flight, right? And they're waiting for it to get to Chinese airspace, and maybe they're going to divert it, or they just let it land and then whisk the people away or something like that, right? And then the United States would never see them again. Now they've stolen some very powerful engineers that work for American Freescale. Some of the best evidence you just reminded me too, and actually the letter mentions this evidence. So 2 things that we found out, which are very important clues. 1, China hacked the Malaysian government the next day. They hacked not just the Malaysian government, they hacked the Department of Transportation.
After the crash.
Or
not crash.
After the disappearance.
Incident. Yeah.
And they did it with a social engineering hack. They sent them like a PDF that says, debris found, MH370 debris found, click here. And they all started clicking there. It's the day after, you know. They click there, boom, now they've hacked their whole system. And they steal the crisis meeting minute notes of the plane and classified information about the plane. First of all, what? Why is there classified information about the plane the day after the plane disappears? And why is China stealing classified information? Look at it right there. March 9th, the day after the plane disappears. They stole classified information about the plane. So why is there anything classified about a plane that is missing a day later? And why is China trying to steal it? Well, the answer is very clear. They're trying to figure out what happened to the plane.
Or the people on it.
Or the people, or both. And then the next thing, March 13th, the same day, or maybe it was March 12th. So right around the same time where the United States starts floating this idea that the plane went in the South Indian Ocean, some satellite imagery just appears on the internet. If you Google MH370 China satellite images, there's a very weird story where all of a sudden these images leak onto the internet. And they start getting reported in Western media as a debris field in the South Indian or South China Sea. There's the number one image right there. What does that look like to you? What's the arrow pointed to?
I don't see my.
Does that look like three objects surrounding a larger object in a triangle formation to you?
Okay.
Because that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
So this is crazy because that is not a debris field. In fact, we can actually tell that this is above the clouds that's right next to. In fact, those clouds are also cumulus clouds that we're looking at right there in this satellite imagery. What if this was the best imagery that China had? What if this is one of their geostationary satellites, like our geostationary satellites, and this was the clearest image they had of this event? So now they would have been tracking it. They would know that the plane disappeared, but they're not going to have all the details about exactly how it happened. So when the MH370 videos leak on the internet, what does the U.S. government think? The U.S. government thinks, oh shit, some spy just leaked the videos that we didn't want China to see those videos. We wanted China to see their crappy, super zoomed out, because they can't tell what's going on in that imagery. And that might be why we also had the plane divert away from China. Why? Because China's surveillance apparatus is right around their country on the South China Sea. But if we go over to the Nicobar Islands, where we're much further away now maybe they don't have as powerful surveillance capabilities.
So the batteries would go into the bottom of the plane so that the plane would have diverted away from China, because it would have caused a fire, and then that would have caused the plane to divert.
And they knew the plane's going to turn around because it's the closest airport's behind them.
Right.
They're not going to keep going.
And they knew that China was going to be watching, and so that we wanted to show them that hey, this is the technology that you were attempting to steal. It's kind of a big you to China, pretty much, right?
Who's your daddy?
Yeah.
And here's another fun fact too, because everything keeps coming into place. Like Robert J. O'Neill, he's the Navy SEAL that killed Osama bin Laden. September 8th, all of a sudden, this year, just a few months ago, September 8th, he posts on Twitter, he says, out of nowhere, MH370 was never a mystery. It was always a warning to China. What? Why is Robert J. O'Neill, the guy who shot Osama bin Laden, SEAL Team 6, why is he all of a sudden saying that he knows that Malaysian Airlines was never a mystery and that it was a warning to China? That is really specific. And then he went on Alex Jones a couple weeks later, and he says it twice more. He says, I'm convinced that Malaysian flight that went missing was 6th generational warfare, that it was us sending a message to China. And I start replying going, dude, who told you this? Who told you this? Like, I'm the only person on the planet saying this. And it came to me from that letter. I'm like, did he write that letter to me? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And he finally did respond, because people were going nuts, right, when he said this. And he said, well, that's the thing. If I told you ... And he's saying, like, I'd have to kill you if I told you. And the reason why I think this is so compelling is he's the kind of guy that people will be telling him stuff like this. You know, people say, how does this stuff leak out? It does leak out because the people at the top talk to other people who are in the know. But at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is like, even if you told people, they wouldn't believe you. You know, it's just that far beyond the paradigm. But to me, you know, all this stuff starts to line up. It really was 6th generational warfare. We really do have the capability to commit a conspiracy like this. And the United States government's the only one with the capability of covering it up. Like, we're the only one that control all the world's media. We can, you know, Dianne Feinstein, rest in peace. She went on CNN, and the CNN host, who I didn't recognize, this is back in 2014, was saying, why don't we have satellite surveillance of the plane? Like, she shows Dianne Feinstein the imagery from the bin Laden raid. And we're watching people walk outside his compound. Like, we've got, like, very clear, too. Like, you can watch them working out on the ground. And she's going, we've got this satellite imagery that you showed us of the Bin Laden raid. So why would we have nothing of a plane that you said was flying around for 8 hours? How would we not have any imagery of it? And her response is just like, again, they always deflect. She's like, oh, well, I can't talk about our surveillance capabilities and blah, 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 right? Because once you look at that satellite video and you start to piece together what we've been piecing together here today about SIBRs and all this stuff, you're like, yeah, there's no chance the plane's disappearing. And we haven't even talked about the SOSUS system. There's also a sound surveillance system that heard that Titan sub implode near the Titanic last year. And we know the Navy lied about it for 5 days.
Yeah, they knew.
While the oxygen counters, they admitted they knew the whole time.
Yeah.
So we know they have no problem lying to the media as well. And that system would have heard the plane crash, no doubt. You talk to any military member in the Navy, they will tell you, we've had this system for decades, since like the 50s. Nothing hits the ocean without us knowing exactly where it is. In fact, it's so sensitive that when Avi Loeb went to go pull these meteorite from the bottom of the ocean, the DOD helped him out without telling him exactly how, and they told him exactly where this tiny meteorite sphericals that are like this size were on the bottom of the ocean. And this was actually in the South China Sea, so it was in the same general region. If we can find tiny meteorite on the bottom of the ocean to the degree where Avi Loeb can go directly to it and go pick them up off the bottom of the ocean, where's the Boeing 777 that disappeared? Right? The other big fact I want to point out, just make sure it's not missed, is that planes don't crash without leaving giant debris fields, and there was never one found. And we now know we have satellite coverage of the whole planet, and that's not just real time. We can go back too. So if this plane did crash into the ocean, we would have seen it within less than 1 day. It would have been leaked to the internet. Here's satellite imagery. United States saw it. Here's exactly where it crashed. Blah, blah, blah. So people are going to say, Ashton, earlier in this interview, you said no debris was found. And that's true. The official search found nothing, not one piece of the debris. The debris that was found by independent civilians. And the reason why it was found by independent civilians is because it was found in Africa, so far away from the supposed crash site in the South Indian Ocean that people didn't even think the debris could be found there. And they were right. It can't be. That's the crazy part. This is the part where people need to think logically for themselves. The moment debris was washing up in Africa, people should have immediately realized it's physically 100% impossible for the plane to have crashed in the South Indian Ocean. It's just too far away. Just too far away. They even did debris drift models before they even found the debris, and we're looking at it right here. The flaperon that was found in the Reunion Island, which is right there, even that couldn't have gotten there in the period of time. The search area is in red there. And you can see just from the debris simulation months, it would take 18 to 24 months just to get to the Reunion Island. That's the closest piece of debris to the crash site. The other ones are even hundreds of miles further inland in Africa than that one is. But yet that flaperon was found in just about 1 year. So basically, this simulation has to be off by like 100% just for this to even be remotely possible.
Do we even know that that's a debris from this specific plane?
Pretty decent degree of certainty, but there's also misinformation about that. And I just wonder, why is there so much misinformation? Why are people misinformed about, they don't realize that the location of the debris completely contraindicates the crash site based on these satellite pings. They both cannot be true at the same time. Yeah. Either you believe the plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean or that debris is from MH370. To believe that both are true is contradictory to one another.
Sure.
The flaperon was missing its unique serial plate. Why is it missing its unique serial? It's bolted onto this thing. How is it missing this? It says metal plate. You guys can find, like, you Google MH370 flaperon serial plate, and there's these stories that say, like, missing serial plate delays confirmation of piece of debris. So instead, they find partial serial or partial part numbers inside. Like, they open it up and they find like a couple numbers in there, and they find, oh, this is a part number that is a part number for a Boeing 777-200.
Okay. But they don't know it's
and
from
then they decide that, okay, they look back through the records and they say that, yes, this part number would have been related to MH370. That's what connects it together. To me, I believe that debris is from MH370. So my opinion is that the plane didn't crash in the South Indian Ocean. If someone wants to present a theory that the plane crashed somewhere further to the west, closer to Africa, consistent with the debris, I would consider it. What I did was I looked at where Diego Garcia military base is in the South Indian Ocean, and I compared it to where the debris was found. And what I found is that it's a perfect match. If this debris went into the oceans in Diego Garcia, then it's going to show up in Africa, all the locations that we found in the time period that we found. Okay. And this is relevant because you asked, well, where did this plane go? Almost all the conspiracy theories that were out there in 2014, which I didn't believe at the time, basically all said the plane went to Diego Garcia. The only deviation was they claimed that it had been remote controlled by United States AWACS, which are these spy plane radar planes. I actually think that Edward C. Lynn, the guy who leaked the videos, might have been on one of those planes that night. So in fact, I don't even rule out remote controlling. Like maybe the pilot was in on it, maybe they weren't in on it, and maybe the United States government took control of the plane after Penang or front to Penang, or can't tell. Or maybe after they teleport this plane, then they remote control it. Hard to say. End of the day, I think the plane ended up in Diego Garcia military base.
You think that it's possible that it didn't just teleport directly there? I mean, why wouldn't they just teleport it directly there?
Maybe they can't. Yeah. So again, it comes down to are there limitations with the technology?
Yeah.
Some people would argue this type of technology would allow you to reduce inertia, meaning that you could set the plane down. But I personally believe that what's happening in those videos, the plane's going to come out on the other side, moving at the same speed in which it came in. Which means that you can't just have it show up in a hangar. It's going to fly into the wall. So my opinion is that it teleported somewhere near the Maldives. Maybe they landed it, maybe they didn't, and then it flew to Diego Garcia. That's my opinion. It's hard to say, but the circumstantial evidence is that there's about 15 or 20 people on a small island. Kuvo, I'm going to say the name wrong. I forget the name. But several people, including Florence Duchesne, Mark Dugain, they went to this island and they talked to these witnesses. And they saw a Boeing 777 or a jumbo jet with the red and white stripe of Malaysian Airlines flying low with steam coming out of the back of it, flying south directly towards Diego Garcia. To me, that's a lot of witnesses on a small island that don't see jumbo jets, with a very, very specific sighting the very next day, the very next morning, in fact. There was also a picture by Philip Wood, the only adult American passenger, that showed up on 4chan around March 19th, so about 10 days after this plane disappears. So yeah, when we're looking at this map right here, so yeah, there's Kuro Hoduvo. So their sighting saw the plane coming from the west and then flying south towards Diego Garcia. They mostly were ignored because everybody expected the plane to be coming from the east. That's where the plane should have been coming from if it had been remote controlled out there. But if the plane was teleported somewhere over near the Maldives, now wherever the plane was coming from is not a problem anymore. So Philip Wood, 10 days later, he posts a picture on 4chan, or somebody pretending to be Philip Wood. And it's just a black picture. It says, "I'm Philip Wood. I've been held prisoner by some military people. I feel like I've been drugged, and I can't think clearly." The biggest question is, why is he posting on 4chan? Why is he not just calling somebody? How does he have cell phone service? How does he have signal at all out there? So I can't say for sure I know this to be legit, but it is pretty weird because people immediately found out that Philip Wood is the guy that was on the missing airliner. They're like, this is the American passenger who's on the missing airliner. He's posting on 4chan. And then they look at the picture and they look at the EXIF data on the picture. It's just a black picture. EXIF data has coordinates in it. It's Diego Garcia. And then we find out, well, Diego Garcia actually is a CIA Black Ops site. We are transporting prisoners in, the Iraq, Afghanistan wars, the things that were going on over there, and we used it as a transportation site. So there's a prison there. And so we're going, okay, well, this is the part where I'm saying, I don't know for a fact that it was Diego Garcia, but it's the only place to hide a plane. And if you throw the debris in the water at Diego Garcia, it's going to wash ashore in Africa, not in Australia. So again, just to bring it back down, you either believe that the satellite pings are correct and that this plane somehow crashed in the South Indian Ocean in one piece, didn't break apart, and that somehow no debris ever washed ashore in Western Australia, where it all should have washed ashore, according to the drift analysis, or you believe that those pieces of debris are from MH370 and that the official story is a lie, and this plane went into the water somewhere else, or it got pulled apart and some pieces got thrown into the water. There's also a theory that maybe the zap that we saw or the fire could have caused certain pieces to fall off of it, We now live in a time where Boeing planes are falling apart. Like doors are flying off of them. Right. I was scared flying here actually on my Boeing plane because I'm like, is the door going to fly off? Yeah. So the fact we find like a piece of engine cowling and some of these other small things, like it's not proof the plane crashed. I was telling you at lunchtime, claiming that finding these 10 to 20 tiny pieces of debris proves the plane crash is like finding my finger and claiming that we know I've been murdered. Yeah. We know something happened. We don't know what exactly occurred.
Especially with the plate, the serial number taken off of it. That's a little bit much.
There's just too much that's super weird about this, including going back to the most important key part, which is we know the United States government knows what happened.
Yeah.
Like, I've put in at least 20 FOIA requests to NSA, CIA, Navy, really every department that is out there.
I'm sure the NSA is being forthright.
Oh, they love to give me information. No, every single one gets rejected. And they always reject it with an Obama era exemption. Heck, I might even have it memorized. I think it's Obama era exemption 13526, which when you look at the subsections, the one they always use, 1.4 C and D, are related to covert operations and national defense. And I'm like, okay, we're hiding all this information. Heck, one of the FOIAs that I just put in, look, I was right. There it is, classified national security information. This is the Obama era exemption they always use. 1.4C, intelligence activities, including covert operation, intelligence sources or methods, or cryptology. And 4 is foreign relations or foreign activities of the United States, including confidential sources. Those are the ones they always use every time. The other one that they use sometimes is it's a different exemption, but it's for the same reasons. And a lot of times when it's something that they can't even confirm or deny it, they'll say, we can't even confirm or deny this exists because the existence itself is classified. They actually sent me two about one of the things that I FOIA'd. There was a fire suppression bottle that washed up in the Maldives, and it's clearly a Boeing 777 fire suppression bottle. And I go, how does this get ignored? It got ignored by everybody. So I FOIA'd the NSA and CIA around this fire suppression bottle. I didn't even say it was related to MH370. So just send me everything you got. There it is right there. That is a Boeing 777 fire suppression bottle. It must be empty, otherwise it would have sank to the bottom of the ocean. It wouldn't have washed ashore. In fact, there's another picture of this where you can see the serial numbers on that piece that's sticking out. And they still ignored it. One of the responses I got back, I can't remember if it was the NSA or the CIA, but one of them said the existence of the fire suppression bottle in general was classified, so they couldn't give me anything. And then the other one said that it was to be kept secret over that exemption related to covert operations. And I'm going, why is a random Boeing 777 fire suppression device being denied from FOIA access by the CIA and NSA? That makes no sense unless it's actually related to MH370, and it's an important clue. I've even FOIA'd everything about Edward C. Lynn's case. I FOIA'd the FBI and NCIS related to his case. They also rejected it under the same exemption, 13526. NCIS wouldn't give me anything. They rejected it in total. I even had a thing from their head lawyer, like his signature on the bottom, whatever, saying it's all classified, can't give you anything. So this is the part where, guys, if this was just a normal disappearance of a plane, if this is a rogue suicidal pilot, there is no classified information that the government is hiding from you. That's just not how. There's nothing important related to that. The only way we're getting rejections like that is because those videos are real and there's real technology that's being suppressed and it just can't come out. One of the other big things, too, is there's a story that Malaysia was given classified information about the plane under condition that they would not reveal the information publicly. And I FOIA'd that too. I FOIA'd that to the CIA as well. That also got rejected. That one they rejected for this case of the existence of it can't be confirmed or denied. Because if you confirm even if you just confirm the existence that you sent them classified information, that it proves it, right? But also at the same time, just the fact that they send you that response proves that it exists. Why? Because when they don't have anything, they reply back and say they didn't find anything. Because I've got several rejections like that as well, where I just didn't hit the right organization with the right question. It's so annoying to FOIA these people. So yeah, I'm very, very confident that United States government is implicated in the disappearance. Barack Obama knows James Clapper knows, John Brennan knows, because these guys were the directors of national intelligence, directors of the CIA. They would have reported Obama. Obama went and visited Malaysia the next month to like smooth things over. The first time that Americans ever visited Malaysia. Just so bizarre. Also, here's some fun facts from Florence Tchengi. The White House was calling Malaysia every day. This is weird, actually. Normally, it would be like the State Department. But why is the White House calling? Because they're trying to get their story straight. They're trying to build a story that people will be able to believe. And clearly they came up with, oh, the plane went into the South Indian Ocean in a very deep spot. You're never going to find it down there, right? Two of the other things that they mentioned was that, so Florence Tchengi did so much research, very impressive lady. She found out that the nephew of the pilot was told by somebody in the Malaysian ministry that they're very sorry for their uncle. Their uncle is collateral damage. That is a weird phrasing to use. Another guy was like a police officer in Indonesia was told by his Malaysian counterpart that they know what really happened to the plane. Why would you say you know what really happened to the plane unless there was a cover-up at play? So I can see why, honestly, my condolences to the families. They deserve it. This is an amazing topic of conversation, but you have to remember there's hundreds of family members who have been gaslit, lied to, told a bunch of nonsense about this. And it's probably impossible for them to believe that this plane had been teleported or annihilated by some advanced weaponry. I don't blame them for that. Eventually, as we catch up to this science, it'll become more and more self-evident and obvious that this is really what happened. But it's a bit tough pill to swallow for right now. But we do have to remember they've been lied to and gaslit, and they knew the whole time that they've been getting lied to. They knew that if this was really just a suicidal pilot or whatever other nonsense story, that they would have been told the truth from the beginning. There wouldn't have been all this obfuscation. The reason why they're crying and getting arrested in all these early press conferences is because they knew they were being lied to. They knew that planes don't just disappear.
So this seems like another one of those things that that the United States government can never admit to doing, though, right? I mean, because they literally murdered over 250 innocent people in order to give a message to, if what you're saying is accurate, to give a message to China. I mean, to murder 20 people, they took out an extra 250 people to send a political message.
Yeah, I agree. I think this really is one of those things I can never admit to. It's like JFK, where it's like JFK, and I'm looking forward to Trump declassifying the JFK stuff, because we find out that literally the government killed our own president or something like that. You can imagine the ramifications. People already assume that, but that will destroy trust in the government. And I think the reason why we've been waiting so long is we're waiting the clock out for all of those old people responsible to die off. That way, no one will ever be responsible. I think they're trying to do the same thing with MH370. It's so massive, and the legal implications are so huge, both from a criminal perspective, but also from a civil perspective, that they just can't admit it.
They can't.
They can't, no matter what. And that's what's crazy about the silence. Like, if this was fake, the United States government would have been coming down so harshly on me. They would have had the media coming down harshly on me, saying there's this guy, Ashton Forbes, spreading dangerous conspiracy theories that sow distrust in our government or what have you. Instead, they're silent. They're terrified of talking about this topic. In fact, any people that get asked about MH370, it's like this taboo thing that you can't bring up because it's so awkward to bring up. Why is it awkward? If it's fake, it shouldn't be awkward at all.
Right.
You should be able to laugh it off. It's awkward because it's real. It's awkward because they don't have any answers. There's no legitimate excuse for it. It's awkward because I've done so much investigation now that I can prove in the court of law that it's real, not just the missing plane that we know about it, but the science is real too. And that's why I was excited to talk to you, because you've been talking to Randall Carlson and Bob Grenier, and these guys are talking about plasmoids and they're talking about cold fusion. And that's exactly where my own independent investigation has led. That we've been hiding cold fusion from people. We probably suppressed Pons and Fleischmann's 1989 discovery that was recreated over 60 times, by the way. And all it took was the DOE and the MIT to come out and say, we were unable to reproduce it. It's all fake, guys. Ignore all these people that reproduced it. It's fake. And then everybody goes, yep, that's fine by me. The authority told me it's fake, And we're doing the same thing now again. And I think that history keeps repeating itself, But now 2024. We're at a point where we're post-COVID. Trust in the government and institutions and academia is at an all-time low. I don't trust them. Science has been corrupted. Academia has been corrupted. All of science is for money now, and whatever outcome you want, you just pay the person to give you the right outcome. They'll make a model, whatever you need. We're at a point now where I think people are starting to see clearly. They're starting to see through this. But if we were ever to admit that we did this to the plane, I mean, President Barack Obama might face criminal charges. Maybe he'd get immunity because he was president. I don't know. I think James Clapper, those guys know about it. But then there's another aspect of the civil liability. So 239 people times a lot of civil liability. This is a fun fact that I haven't brought up in a lot of podcasts, which is I looked into the court cases around the plane. This is wild, actually. So I find out that Philip Wood's brothers, James and Thomas, they were the leading plaintiffs against Boeing and Malaysian Airlines in the United States. They should have had, I forget what it was, standing or whatever you call it in lawyer terms, where it's an American citizen and Boeing's an American company. You're suing in America. You should have the right to sue here. And it gets dismissed. The case ends up getting dismissed from non-Corvus, whatever. Basically says wrong location. Should be tried in China or Malaysia, which was a weird ruling to make by the judge because of what I just mentioned due to who was all responsible and informed. Well, who was the judge in 2018, I believe it was, that finally dismissed the case? Her name was Ketanji Brown Jackson. Well, she's now Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She got appointed Supreme Court Justice under Obama. Under Biden. And I'm not trying to say there's a massive conspiracy here. I mean, there is, obviously, but in this case, it's pretty damn weird that the judge that ruled against Philip Wood and his brothers is Ketanji Brown Jackson. She used to be U.S. District Court judge, and then she dismissed all 40 lawsuits after concluding that the claims asserted in the consolidating complaints have a substantial and overriding nexus to Malaysia that outweighs the less substantial connection to the United States. That's a very subjective argument to make. Yeah. Because somebody else would come in and say, he's an American, Boeing's an American company. Right.
But
and why is this important?
It's not our problem, basically.
Yeah. And the reason why this is important is they got way less money from Malaysia and China than they would have got from the United States. We're talking millions if this is tried in the United States. You know how much money these people got? I looked it up. From China and Malaysia, on average, roughly about $30,000 each.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
That's sad.
That's less than what they were given just right off the bat. They were given $50,000, no, you don't have to sign anything. But if you took the $30,000, you had to sign a deal that said you're not going to talk about what's going on here. You're not going to talk bad about Malaysia or what have you. There's still about 40 families still fighting in China right now over this. So I just look at this and go, wow. But here's the other side of the liability. It goes beyond just the plane. If those orbs are Lockheed Martin technology, let's say, hypothetically, this is the whole thing where it dives into the UFO phenomenon. Why have we not gotten disclosure? That's a big question everybody should ask. If it's just aliens, guys, it's not the 90s anymore. Like, aliens existing are not some big taboo thing. Right. Spoiler alert, aliens probably exist, guys. I don't know where they come from, whatever, if they're visiting us or not, but they're out there somewhere. With a big universe, there's life everywhere. Aliens existing, not that crazy. Having anti-gravity plasma orbs that can teleport planes, that's pretty miraculous. Especially if that leads to free energy, then that's really miraculous, and that changes everything about our whole planet that's out there. So the reason why we potentially haven't had disclosure isn't aliens. It has nothing to do with aliens. It's not a national security issue or whatever. But if we find out that we helped out Lockheed Martin because they were our preferred defense contractor of choice, maybe we gave them something that helped them figure out anti-gravity or whatever. Now there's a major legal liability. Why? Because the other companies that weren't Lockheed Martin, that didn't get that preferential treatment, can sue the crap out of Lockheed Martin and the government. Because that is plain favorites. The government's not allowed to do that in a free market. This is really where the real legal liability comes in. It's kind of sad that civil liability might be a bigger issue for against disclosure than all the criminal crap that we've done to try to cover it up, including, at minimum, the abduction of 239 people, but possibly the murder of 239 people on that plane. So for me, there's this UFO hearing that probably just occurred by the time this played, and it's going to be a big shit show. It's going to be more people telling stories, people trying to tell you that aliens exist, people trying to tell you that, UFOs are going above and below water. Oh, whoop-de-doo, we knew that 8 years ago, right? Like, neat. Right. Like, what I want to know is, what is the energy source? If we've got these UFOs, orbs, flying saucers, whatever, that can just float freely for hours and achieve hypersonic instantaneous acceleration, you just do the math on the energy required for that to happen, and it quickly becomes astronomical numbers. And if you just do E equals mc squared and say, okay, convert that energy to mass, you get this huge amount of mass. Well, now that mass needs to be inside that UFO. And I don't see any rocket engines on this thing. And the more mass you add to it, the heavier it gets. And now the more energy you need too. So it becomes a runaway problem. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So then this is the rub. This is what I want everybody to ask. And if they don't ask this in the congressional hearing, I am going to be coming down on them so hard, is what's the energy source for this UFO, whatever it is? And I think this is the answer to the whole phenomenon. It's not about aliens. It's about what's that energy source? Because whatever it is, it obsoletes everything that we're using right now. And the answer is 0 point energy. 0 point energy. The answer to how cold fusion works, negative energy, all this stuff goes back to 0 point energy. This idea that we are in an ether of energy. And it's not a small amount. It's a huge amount. And we're sitting on the surface of this ocean. And we don't realize that we've got all this energy to tap into. That is the source of all of this, that UFO must be extracting energy from all around it, from the environment around, in a way that we don't really understand that well. And that is also how the reason why we see that heat signature in the orb is that Ken Shoulders believed, he called them EVOs, exotic vacuum objects, because he believed the only way they were able to be self-sustaining for long periods of time is they must be getting extra energy from the vacuum, from the ether all around them. And that's why he was so piqued in 1980 when he found that Bergstrom paper that said, the ether is real. There really is an ether of energy. And this changes everything about our perspective of physics. Is that when we look in outer space, why do we see gravitational lensing? It's not necessarily just that there's this gravitational well, but that we're changing the refractive index of the space-time in that region. And what happens when we change the refractive index? It bends. Just like if I were to put a stick in a river, it's going to look offset. Same exact concept. So incredible stuff in terms of the science around these orbs and the suppression related to it, and what this means for UFO disclosure.
Right. Yeah. Do you think that Grush and Lou Elizondo are government plants? Do you think that they're legitimately think that they're telling the truth? What are your thoughts?
Well, let me put it in this context for you. So Lou Elizondo went on a big speaking tour. Every single mainstream media TV show. He was on The Daily Show. This is not organic. You usually need like a publicist to get you on all this stuff. And he even had the Joe Rogan appearance timed right after his book came out. In his book, there's a part in his book where he talks about a 23-minute video. It's somewhat famous in the UFO sphere because he's talked about it on podcasts but never given any details. He talks about it in detail in this book. He says it's a Predator drone filming 3 orbs in a perfect triangle formation that have some like mass to them. They have form to them. He's basically explaining the drone video that we just looked at. And I'm reading the pages and I can't even believe what I'm reading, because he's not talking about the MH370 video. He's talking about a very similar video of orbs of energy playing around with a drone, with a UAV, a Predator drone. So I'm going, whoa. If you've seen a video like that, you have to know that MH370 videos are real. Mm-hmm. You have to. I mean, you know that kind of thing exists, and now you're seeing a thing of a plane disappearing. Mm-hmm. Why is Lou Elizondo avoiding me and these videos like the plague? Why is he even blocked on Twitter? Because isn't he trying to get disclosure, right? This is what you need to know about his book. He thanks James Clapper in his book, the same James Clapper who was director of national intelligence under Obama that would 100% know what happened to MH370. So do I think Lou Elizondo is a disinformation agent? In a certain regard, yes, absolutely. I think that these are good guys. I think that I have nothing against Lou Elizondo other than the fact that he's clearly omitting a lot of information. David Grush, the guys, you're going to find a common thread between all these people. Even Michael Schellenberger, who was reporting with Ross Kohler just a few weeks ago about Immaculate Constellation or whatever. He's talking about orbs of energy and plasma and all this stuff, but they all say the same thing. I'm not going to harm national security. They say the same. Anytime you hear somebody say those words, you want to be skeptical about whatever else they're going to say. Why? Because aliens aren't a national security issue. They have no problem talking about aliens. Oh, sure, there's gray aliens, reptilians, whatever. They're going to tell you all that. What they're not going to tell you about is what's the energy source. That's the national security issue. That's the reason why the DOE is in charge of the UFO phenomenon. Why is the DOE, Department of Energy, in charge of the UFO phenomenon? It makes no sense. Well, it does once you realize the real, like, the puppet is who is in that craft flying it around.
When you say they're in charge of what do you mean?
They're the top dog in the sense that they have higher clearance and higher authority than the president does.
Okay.
Q level clearance, they call it. I don't really know all the details about it, but the DOE seems to be the most secretive area.
So you think that then like Lou Elizondo we know is a former counterintelligence person. So that's what he's trained in. That's what his whole history was. So misinformation and disinformation. So do you think that he's intentionally spreading an alien-ish kind of a story to keep people away from the fact that this is government technology for the most part?
Hard to say. I think that they've just been allowed to talk about this alien side of it. The funny part for me is that the more I've learned about this, the less sure I am about the alien thing. Like, could be ultra terrestrials, could be no aliens at all, could be just a big psyop to like get people to ignore how long we figured this technology out. It's a perfect cover, if you ask me. People say, well, where did it come from? Well, where did atomic power come from, right? Who knows? You could argue maybe both of those were figured out from crashed flying saucers or something, or maybe we dug something up. You have a lot of people on here talk about ancient archaeology and stuff like that, and the idea of civilizations being reset. I think you could argue that the theories that I propose give merit to those ideas, because this technology, like I said, maybe figuring out these balls of plasma is analogous to figuring out fire. And that means it's a discovery, not an invention. And once you figure it out, you've just shot up the civilization scale to a degree that we can't even really comprehend. So I think that they've been told that they're fine to talk about that. And then the moment you broach the energy aspect of it, weaponization, propulsion, any of that, that's where they have to be very careful. The crazy part is now, like, I've literally been pushing the boundaries. Like, a year ago, no one was talking about warp drives and wormholes. In fact, I sounded like a crazy person talking about it. Now, Lou Elizondo's going on all these podcasts and stuff, and he's talking about it. He's talking about, let me explain to you if I fold the paper like this, it explains how, and I'm going, well, this is what Bob Lazar's saying when he's saying squeeze the beams and then space comes to you, is that you're created in an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Independence Day, we learned about that, didn't we, with that scientist folding
a little
paper?
bit, yeah, exactly. And that's the idea of a wormhole, is you're taking space-time and you're folding the paper in half and you're puncturing a hole through it.
Right.
And what does this mean? All points in space and time are connected, just like what Ben Rich said. And it was so awkward, but also hilarious, because I went on Glenn Beck, and it was one of the best interviews that I had done, blew Glenn Beck's mind.
Until this one,
of course. And he had Lou Elizondo on a few weeks later. And I could tell that all of a sudden he starts talking about warp drives. And Glenn Beck goes, is that like a wormhole? And Lou Elizondo gets super excited. He's like, yeah, it's like a wormhole. And you could just tell Glenn Beck was thinking of our conversation, because next thing he goes, have you ever heard of this Malaysian flight, MH370 Disappears? And Lou Elizondo's demeanor does a 180 flip.
Really?
He was super excited. Next thing you know, he gets super guarded. Head goes down a little bit. And he's going, well, people are calling me a conspiracy theorist on Wikipedia. And I'm going, so? You are. Like, you're saying that we're hiding aliens and all this stuff, and the government's covering it up and all this. And you're talking about warp drives and wormholes and stuff like that. And he basically says that, like, I don't do conspiracy theorists, which is crazy because you do, obviously. And he says that some of my people told me that it's fake, and other people are telling me that it's real, and I don't dig into that at all, which is crazy because, like, if you are a counter intel guy, if you're a disclosure guy, you should know about like all the main people that are out there that are parallel to you in the world.
Right.
And this is what makes me very suspicious of Lou Elizondo, because that's a bizarre way to respond.
100%.
You ask me about him, and I'm going to give you my full unadulterated opinion.
Yeah.
If you ask him about me, then you get this weird standoffish kind of view. So I'm skeptical about it from that. I also saw him on Patrick Bet-David where he like took a shot at Stephen Greer for some reason, and I'm not aligned with anybody in the UFO community, but I think Stephen Greer was probably the most correct, because he has talked to the Black Project engineers. And I've watched a lot of the interviews he did with them. Those engineers are 100% legit. This is how Greer knows about zero-point energy, free energy, how he knows about teleportation. He just didn't dig into the science as much as I dug into it to find all the history of who figured it out and when. But Lou Elizondo does something weird with Patrick Bet-David, pretends like he doesn't know who Dr. Greer is, but also pretends like he doesn't know who Bob Lazar is. Like, dude, you're a disclosure advocate and you don't know like two of the biggest names in the whole field, and then tries to play dumb where he's like, oh, wasn't Greer that guy that like shared some fake picture or whatever, as if he doesn't know exactly what he's talking about. That's like me coming out here, you asking me about Lou Elizondo, I'd be like, I don't really know who Lou Elizondo is, never really heard of him, but isn't he that guy that like posted a fake picture of a chandelier in some private organization that he was just, or private event he was just in last week, right? Like, and that, like, you're just like, you're poisoning the well, right?
Yeah.
So I think that stuff's crazy, and it goes to show that like one of the best things that you can be in this disclosure world is authentic.
Yeah.
Like authentic, because those guys are not, they're not authentic. Although again, I think they're good people, but I think that they look at the government and they say, America number one, I'm not going to risk it. And truthfully, I wonder too, but for slightly different reasons, is that I look at that technology in those videos, and to me, it's very easy to see how that could become a doomsday weapon. Like not a nuclear weapon. I mean like a doomsday weapon, like goodbye planet, whole planet gone, just like that. And in fact, it gets scary because you could start to miniaturize it to the point where it might be the size of my cell phone, which would mean that anybody on this planet in the future could have a weapon that could blow up the whole planet. And then the question there is, okay, now I can see why it's a national security issue. Oh yeah, this
is required to explain it.
Did you see the theory on the missing Malaysia airliner, where it was? Have you seen that?
I've seen it, and I'm always very careful for me, Glenn, because recently. So look, I'm a science guy, right? I've always just follow the science. Recently, about 3 weeks ago, Google, someone on Wikipedia decided to label me as a quote unquote conspiracy theorist. I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. That's just someone trying to minimize, this topic and kind of chip away at the narrative. I'm very careful to be open-minded about everything. I know that the Malaysia airline, there were some people that were claiming there was maybe some UAP involvement. I don't know. I did not pursue it. I know some of the people that I've talked to were dead for it and dead against it. Something that's a complete nonsense. It's fake. Others said, no, that looks legit. And I could not tell you, Len. I have no idea. I am not I do not go down the conspiracy rabbit hole very often, simply because
By the way, aliens exist, guys. Like, how crazy is that as a response?
Yeah.
And here's the craziest part: the people that I found that all their science is publicly available, peer reviewed. It's Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis. Lou Elizondo has name dropped Hal Puthoff on Joe Rogan. He name drops Hal Puthoff in Glenn Beck's interview. Hal Puthoff is Lou Elizondo's lead scientist. He's the one that they're in skiffs, and Puthoff is explaining the science of wormholes and warp drives to Lou Elizondo, and I'm quoting and listing Hal Puthoff's papers as how all this stuff is real. So when he says some of the people are telling me this is how it looks and what have you, he's talking about the engineers and scientists who are advising him. And the people that claim it looks fake, those are the people that, the skeptics and debunkers on the internet, and other people who have no clue about how science works and what have you. So it's crazy. This is too suspicious to me.
I agree.
It's like, how can this guy? He knows that the videos are. And just like I said, this was right after he came out with a book, where the book is talking about a predator drone seeing 3 orbs in a perfect triangle formation.
Right.
That's just too bizarre. And now in the zeitgeist of the UFO phenomenon, we're seeing that orbs in a triangle formation are all over the place. I've got like half a dozen pretty credible videos that show the same phenomenon. So, yeah, I think that we're going to find that's the future. And I think you have to be very careful when someone's affiliated with the government.
Right. As a counterintelligence person.
As a counterintelligence person. Like, what's the filter with which the information's coming out?
Yeah.
And so we're going to find out in the future that we've got balls of plasma, that they are naturally antigravitic, mass reduction, inertia reduction, which is how they can just zip around in any direction. But the real rub is going to be, we're going to find out that it's essentially a infinite battery. It is an infinite battery. It is free energy. Free energy doesn't mean monetarily zero, although the price will come down. Free energy means there's a supply of energy that's unlimited in its reservoir.
Right.
Like having solar power that doesn't require the sun, or wind power that doesn't require wind. That's the real analogy to it.
Balls of plasma.
Yeah, balls of plasma. That's the secret here.
So Randall Carlson, so I'm going to have him back on the show. He just talked. I talked to him last week, and he was on the show a couple months ago, and he was mentioned in this letter to Ashton that was sent to you as the bearded man. And if anyone, we should post that video in the comment section of this episode, or somewhere in the description of the episode, so that people can watch it, because it's fascinating and phenomenal. If that's a legitimate letter, that's crazy, and it certainly seems like all the other evidence. Why wouldn't it be? So Randall, I'll get him back on. I'm going to have him watch this episode between now and then, so that he can get up to speed. And if there's anything, I mean, what would you say to Randall right now? How could you guys collaborate to kind of push these things forward a little bit?
Really, what I want to know is, how did he figure out about the plasmoid stuff? So a lot of these terms, especially in physics and science, they use different terms for the same thing. So when it comes to cold fusion, that's low energy nuclear reactions, also now being called catalyzed fusion. When it comes to these balls of plasma, they've been called plasmoids, which is kind of an overall term. They've been called exotic vacuum objects. They've been called ball lightning. These are all, again, all the same types of ideas. And there was a clip of Randall Carlson that blew me away. It was either from Sean Ryan or Joe Rogan, where like he clearly understands that these plasmoids, there's this connection to what he would call sacred geometry. But for the layman, the way I would describe it is that we've discovered that this plasma just self-organizes into a spherical shape using a magnetic monopole, which has only been, to this point, theoretically possible based on Paul Dirac's equations. But if we have this extra connection to this extra dimension, this is potentially how we can create a magnetic monopole effect. And what I want to know from Randall Carlson, because that letter basically says that like Randall Carlson knows more than he even realizes that he knows.
Right.
And in the video clip that I was mentioning, he talks about this idea that what happens in these plasmas is the electrons get ripped from their atoms, and this creates a ion, positively charged ion, and this negatively charged separated electron. And this is what we do when we create hypersonic plasma sheaths that allow our spy planes to fly. What I think happened was that at some point we figured out that when we make these plasma sheaths to fly our planes, why have the plane and the occupant at all? This is just a liability. The plasma is what's doing the magic. And if we take the plasma sheath and we turn it to its own drone, now it becomes a plasma sphere that we can control and fly around. And now we don't have to worry about the plane at all. In fact, now there's no liability. We don't have to worry about somebody crashing or anything like that. And everything's drones now. So what we find out is that when this happens, first of all, we can't understand why. Now, Ken Shoulders would argue it's related to connecting to the vacuum and this like Coulomb repulsion versus Casimir attraction that allows it to occur, which I think is very logical. But it creates this weird battery, basically. So what I would want to know or explore with Randall Carlson is this cold fusion? How is this happening? Is it related to negative energy, which I think it must be related to, and that's what we think the Casimir effect is showing. Is that, just for people who don't know, the Casimir effect, Hendrik Casimir, 1948, figure out you take two conductive plates and put them very close together, very, very close together, and there will be attractive force between them. And they said, oh, well, this is kind of like an anti-gravity. This is a negative energy pressure. that's causing them to come together. And this idea proves that zero point energy is real. Zero point energy is not a sci-fi thing. Zero point energy is 100% real. It's been proven to be real with the Lamb shift, Casimir effect, various other experiments as well. We just can't really understand and explain it. Well, if this is a negative energy pressure, what if negative energy is just related to the 0 point energy? Like, and this is where Hal Puthoff would say we're in this ocean of energy. So negative energy is just the same energy, but going below sea level. Above sea level, adding energy. Below sea level, pulling energy out. And this opens the door to everything. It opens the door to free energy, cold fusion, opens the door to teleportation, warp drives, wormholes. All this stuff requires negative energy. So at some points, people just realize negative energy is not some exact substance. It's this effect that we see where it has to do with the distribution of energy throughout space-time. And if we can manipulate that, then instead of like hot fusion, where we're just trying to like throw stuff together at really high temperatures and hope it fuses, we've now like engineered it where we're going to gravitationally force these things to come together, but at very low energy levels, and then cause fusion at low temperatures, low energy. So I would want to know what his thoughts are on some of that. And I think we talked about, or maybe we didn't, but there's a clip of Ken Shoulders talking about how these balls of plasma can cause things to disappear. In fact, he even mentions basically like teleportation to transport it from one location to the next. And he said they saw this in the lab with atoms. So atom is big enough that it's a macroscopic thing, right? And they saw something get teleported, which really opens the door to like, man, I would love to see what Ken Shoulders or Hal Puthoff or some of these other guys think about these videos, you know? And so for me, a lot of the people that I try to talk to are the engineers. Like people that have stories, that's fine, nothing against it. But I want to talk to the guys that are working on the black project stuff. Like what kind of stuff are we working on that's out there? So one of the people that I've spoken to several times, who's now a friend of mine, is Salvatore Paez. Are you familiar with his patents at all?
No, I know the name and I saw him on your episode too. Yeah.
So his patents, they were approved under the Navy. He works with the Navy. He's an engineer for the Navy. Around 2016 through 2018, he has a magnetically confined fusion plasma device, patent. He has inertial mass reduction for transmedium craft, piezoelectric induced high temperature superconductivity, high frequency gravitational wave generator, and I'm probably missing one, but that's enough. But when you look at all those patents and you actually add them all up together, a lot of people think, oh, it creates a flying saucer, a UFO. Actually, if you really add them all together, it creates a ball of plasma that is freely floating that can float around. Because otherwise, why does he have one about magnetically confined fusion reaction? You know, and you look at that, it uses like counter-rotating magnetic fields, which is if you were to ask Randall Carlson about this, he'll probably say like, yeah, that's
Bob Greenyer.
Or Bob Greenyer. Yeah, exactly. A lot of it has to do with counter-rotating fields and frequencies that they use to make that possible. So I think that Salvatore Paez, and I only realized this probably a month or two ago, he may have engineered those orbs, or may know who did, or may recognize some of his patents in those videos, which would explain why he was so excited to talk to me a year ago when nobody else was really talking to me. No engineers were talking to me, but he was excited and he was praising me. And I'm sitting there like, why is this guy praising me? He's a Navy engineer, right? I'm like, does he know me from the future? Like, what's going on here? But now when you look at it in the context of like, this random guy is showing the world my technology that nobody believes is real, of course you'd be excited about that, right? So I'm going to interview him on November 24th again, follow-up interview on my podcast. And I'm going to get us disclosure. Like, I'm going to push disclosure further than that UFO hearing is going to push disclosure. Because what I found out as well is that, I think it's okay to say this, is that why is he not testifying to Congress?
Right.
You know,
Because
it turns out there's this big process where you have to go through the official channels if you want to interview somebody that's like in the government or in the Navy like that, and they're never going to let him testify. They're never going to let him do that. So I have a big benefit because I have a personal relationship with him now. So I'm not beholden to those same criteria. And I'm going to ask him straight up if he made the orbs or if he knows who did. I'm actually going to show him the video that we watched, especially that zap. And I'm just going to say, what do you see when you watch this? Like, because I just want to get his unadulterated opinion on like what sticks out to you. Because if you're somebody that made some component, this thing's going to be, your alarm bells are going to be going off in your head when you're staring, you're going, well, I'm looking at my high frequency gravitational wave pattern right there, and I'm looking at my magnetically confined fusion thing, you know, like, and oh, by the way, I'm looking at a negative energy event, and I know that that's real, but the public doesn't understand it.
Right.
You know, that's a powerful statement to make. Yeah. If somebody made that statement to Congress, it would be waking people up. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope that someday in the future, I get to talk to people like Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis. But these are guys that I think they have so many NDAs and like clearances and things like that that they just like they don't do interviews for that reason. Because you run into someone like me and information is going to start leaking out. Like I only ask hard questions. You know, I don't do softballs. So
Right. Well, good. I'll be tuning into that. That'll be great.
That'll be fun.
Cool. Maybe one more question or two, and then we got to get you out of here because you got a flight. But
it's been awesome, though.
Yeah, for sure. It's been good times. You mentioned you no longer fear nuclear war.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What? I mean, I guess the inference is that we think that this technology would just instantaneously disable, those types of weapons. But could it also teleport nuclear weapons from China 100%. To anywhere to the U.S.
And really, once you open the door to plasma physics, or they call it condensed matter physics, if you open the door to scalar physics, which is something Tom Bearden, legendary engineer, rest in peace, Tom Bearden, talked about, you've opened the door to directed energy weapons, and then all the different aspects of this plasma, which is not just free energy, teleportation, cloaking, really anything that you could come up with, your mind can come up with, we can do. I think Ryan was just talking about Annie Jacobson's book, and she does this minute by minute of what would happen in a nuclear scenario. Well, this cyber system is able to detect a heat signature that appears within like a fraction of a second and alert somebody. If somebody were to shoot a nuke, my first thought is it's a liability, if anything, because we would just immediately shoot a directed energy weapon at the nuke and blow it up right there on the spot wherever it's taking off, like within under a minute, by easily, maybe under seconds. The other thought is so these balls of plasma, they represent free energy. They represent the ability to manifest energy out of the ether, that's all around it, or out of the 0 point field. They represent the ability to transmute elements. And this is why they're really covering it up, is that, man, what is going to happen in the economy if it turns out scarcity is all a lie, and we have unlimited energy and we can produce any element that we want? That's huge.
Yeah, that changes a couple things.
It changes a lot. Yeah. And so these, but the point here being that, yes, we could teleport the object back, a nuke back onto them, called a warp nuke is what I like to call it, which is a fun name. Shout out to Star Captain Dread on Twitter. He came up with that name. Warp the nuke back onto them. We could also potentially transmute the elements within the nuke that are the catalyst for the destructive effect and make it inert as well. So when I say I'm not afraid of nuclear war, part of it is because we have capabilities that make nukes completely obsolete. But the other part of it is that our weaponry is so advanced that, that it's like little child's toys. Nukes are little child's toys, little firecrackers at this point. And part of the reason why we did what we did to the plane is to send a message to our adversaries. Because if you have a super weapon, it's great. But if nobody knows you have the super weapon, then it's not a deterrent. But if they know you have a super weapon that can make a plane disappear, even teleport it or annihilate it, and you can have the whole world and all the Western media eating out of your hand and believe some completely fake story about it going to the South Indian Ocean with no evidence whatsoever, then what do you think Putin or China's leadership or North Korea's leadership, next time they get on a plane, how scared do you think that they are?
Yeah.
Right? We're basically telling them we can take you out anytime we want, whenever we want, and the world will believe whatever we tell them. Heck, look at the Iranian president's helicopter that went down.
Yeah.
Do people really think that thing just randomly crashed from some clouds while it was in a formation with two other helicopters? No, we just probably sabotaged it or shot a directed energy weapon at it. No one's going to ever know. No one's going to ever know. Especially right after they shot a bunch of missiles at Israel. I mean, guys, come on, man.
Right.
So that's the real rub on this. And this is why I have no fear of nuclear weapons anymore. But at the same time, the weapons that we're talking about are infinitely more powerful and more dangerous.
Right. And so do other countries, do you think, is it not just a period of time until somebody like China develops this and Russia develops this. I mean, if they saw what we did to the plane, they're going to want that. And so they're going to want to study it. And they were obviously already trying to steal, if this is all true, they were trying to already steal that information from us and take it. So they know it exists already.
And
even
now they saw
that.
those videos, right?
Yeah.
And if I was able to reverse engineer those videos and figure out all the scientists and all the scientific papers, then Russia and China definitely figured it out.
Right.
In fact, you could probably argue, why am I even allowed to talk about this? Why has the government not stopped me? Maybe because they already know China and Russia have figured it out, and we're just playing a game of it's just a matter of when they catch up and get this technology as well. Maybe they already have. Maybe they already have. I mean, Iran just the other day was saying we have technology that's more powerful than nuclear weapons. What are they talking about, right? And what if these plasmas, again, are just like finding fire? So if aliens do exist, maybe this is like finding fire for them, and now you've moved on to a completely different level of technological advancement, far beyond anything else before. If that's the case, it's just a matter of time before all countries in the world figure it out. And that's what I tell people, is that I think it is just a matter of time. And that's also part of the reason why I think that, doomsday is inevitable, unfortunately, for us. Here's a scary thought. I'll give you a scary thought and then a positive thought as we kind of close this out. One is that we don't know how a lot of black holes in outer space even form. We don't have a basis to understand. They're too small. We think the supermassive ones, we think maybe during the Big Bang, all this stuff came together and we got this black hole. But the smaller ones, we can't really explain. What if these are just relics of civilizations that were out there that figured out zero-point energy? And once any sufficiently advanced civilization that has any conflict whatsoever exists, they annihilate themselves. Peter Thiel was on Joe Rogan, and I can't stop thinking about this. This is a guy that is connected to the CIA through Palantir. I'm sure he's in the know. He starts talking about warp drives, and he says, what if any alien civilization has this advanced technology? Must be either all angels or all demons in order for them to not destroy themselves. Like, you must have complete control or complete trust over every single person in your civilization. And you're like, oh, that's a pretty big ask. Like, we're not going to get that. Like, we're probably closer to the totalitarian all demons type of side than we are to the all angels type of side. Yeah. So that's what scares me, is that I'm pretty sure this is annihilation. It's just a matter of time for us, or we advance to a point where we become all angels or all demons. That's the scary side. Maybe we do need a WEF, one world government, in order to not wipe ourselves out. Right. Maybe the elites have decided that. The other side of it is this. So that's the negative side. The positive side is LIGO. LIGO detected gravitational waves in 2015. There's definitely not the first time that we detected gravitational waves. That's just the first time we talked about it publicly. I know that because Robert M.L. Baker won a Lifetime Achievement Award for high-frequency gravitational waves in 2011, 4 years prior, and he has dozens of papers about gravity waves. And he worked for Lockheed Martin. They all seem to, weirdly. But when we look out there, LIGO is looking for low-frequency gravitational waves, like astronomical neutron stars coming together to form black holes. And we've detected the gravitational ripples that come from that. Robert M.L. Baker and others would say that you need to look for high-frequency gravitational waves if you want to find lab-produced ones or artificially produced ones. Well, that's a techno-signature. What's going to happen when we turn LIGO up and we start looking for high-frequency gravitational waves? My opinion is that the universe is going to light up. We're going to see people using warp drives or beings using warp drives all over. We're going to find anomalies everywhere. Techno-signatures everywhere. And that will, I think, be the point where we get alien disclosure, where we realize, oh crap, they're the techno-signatures. All we had to do was turn our LIGO, our gravitational wave device. Aliens aren't using radio waves or electromagnetic waves. They've figured out that they can transmit longitudinally through the ether, the same way Hal Puthoff's patent is a communication device that transmits through the ether with no electromagnetic field. And this is the way they do it, because also it's possibly faster than light communication as well. So that's my message of hope for people that are out there. And if this stuff starts to come true, all I would ask is that people be open-minded about it, not freak out about it, and try to advance our civilization to be the best civilization we can be.
Mm-hmm. And the most united, potentially. I mean, we need to be, we need to stop warring at some point, especially as these weapons get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, yeah.
That's one question, too, that people ask is, well, if we have this, why are we not using it? Well, it's called like a 0 hour or 0 day exploit, the same way they call it with like hacking and stuff like that, is that if you have this weapon that's this unstoppable weapon, you only use it like a trump card. You only break it out when you have to, because the moment you do, now it's been exposed. Now everybody else can make countermeasures or copy it or whatever else. But yes, absolutely, we have to have peace. Like, we have to be a united civilization in order to harness this technology successfully. And we might not be able to have like cults or religious fundamentalism, because people are literally going to make cults around this technology and try to be the first ones to destroy the planet with it. Sadly, that's just how humans are in some cases. They're going to want to bring them around the end times or whatever. So we have a lot of tough questions to ask ourselves, assuming this stuff is real. And that's part of the reason why I push forward, is that we need to have these conversations. These conversations need to be out there in the public.
Love it. Love it. Well, you're super brave, obviously highly intelligent, incredible investigative skills, and you've put together a lot of pieces here that no one else in the world has really been able to put together. Super logical, super smart, makes a hell of a lot of sense to me, and I look forward to diving in on more episodes. I look forward to having you back on a future episode for sure. I feel like we could talk for another couple days, and I'd still continue to learn. So really just want to, say I really appreciate your time and you coming down and explaining this to me and the audience out there, and we'll keep this train rolling, because I want to keep learning about this, and we've got to talk about it to make people aware. So
yeah, we've had some awesome conversations. Quick shout out to my social medias at JustXAshton across all the social medias: YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Also, please follow Matt. Please follow the podcast here, guys, for all my followers. He's had some amazing guests on, and I can't wait to watch the other conversations you have with your other guests. Yeah, awesome. Very good, man. Well, we'll do it again. And like I said, really appreciate your time, and let's get you to your plane on time. And hopefully your plane is, I won't even go there. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Appreciate it.